Speaker, I'll answer questions 1, 6 and 19 together. Israel must immediately allow rapid and unhindered aid into Gaza. The Foreign Secretary raised the humanitarian situation with Israeli Foreign Minister Saar on Sunday. We've recently announced £4 million of further UK humanitarian support for Gazans, and we will continue to urge Israel to lift restrictions on humanitarian aid to allow the UN and other aid organisations to operate safely and independently.
Thank you, Minister. This morning I heard from my medical colleague, Dr. Rebecca Inglis, of Healthcare Workers Watch, that a GP in Gaza was killed by Israeli soldiers, shot in the head, Mr. Speaker. He is just one of 1,200 healthcare workers who have been murdered by Israeli forces. Countless others have been unlawfully detained and tortured. Israel is deliberately destroying the Palestinian healthcare system. Will the Minister please raise this with his Israeli counterpart?
Minister.
I can confirm to my honourable friend that I have raised these issues with my Israeli counterpart. It is appalling that hundreds of healthcare workers have reportedly been killed since the start of the conflict. We continue to urge the Israeli authorities to ensure that incidents are investigated transparently and that those responsible are held to account and lessons learned. Healthcare workers, premises and facilities must be protected, allowing medical staff to do their work.
First.
More than 450 Palestinians have been killed in recent weeks when Israeli forces opened fire on those attempting to collect aid from GHF. The people of Gaza not only face daily risks from bombs and bullets, but the ever-present danger of man-made drought and famine. Will the government commit to using all resources at its disposal, including further sanctions and arms embargo, to ensure that aid is delivered to Gaza under the auspices of the UN and other suitably qualified bodies?
Minister.
The killing of civilians at aid distribution centres in Gaza is horrifying. Israel must fulfil its obligations under international law to ensure unhindered humanitarian assistance. I won't speculate about future sanctions or arms embargoes, but we do continue to engage with our partners and will not hesitate to further action if the government of Israel does not change course.
Mr. Speaker, Musa Abu Darabi is just one of hundreds of Palestinians who have been killed trying to access food from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in recent weeks. 15 international human rights organisations have now warned that the GHF may face legal consequences for aiding and abetting or otherwise being complicit in crimes under international law, including war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide. Will the Minister join me in condemning the murder of desperate and starving people, and what assessment does he make of the GHF's legality?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no one should risk death or injury to feed their family. And as I said in this House on the 4th of June, Israel's aid delivery measures are inhumane. We will not support any mechanism that endangers civilians. And we've continuously called on Israel, including most recently on Sunday, to immediately allow the UN and aid partners to safely deliver all types of aid at scale.
On 3 occasions, the Minister, in answering this question, has said Israel must. What will he do if Israel doesn't?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman knows, this government has taken a series of actions in response to developments in Gaza. We will continue to take such actions until the situation changes.
Alexis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is the government's assessment of how effectively medical aid can be delivered to those in need in Gaza, including the remaining Israeli hostages?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, aid can be delivered effectively into Gaza. There is an established mechanism through the United Nations and its partners. We want to see those mechanisms in place, but the honourable gentleman raises the vital question of ensuring that the hostages themselves get sufficient access to food. Both my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, and I have heard directly from Eli Sharabi, a released hostage, who talks about the deprivation of food from hostages by Hamas. That must stop, and they must immediately release all hostages.
Mr. Speaker, my Bath constituents have watched in horror as Israeli forces have reportedly killed over 400 Palestinians and injured thousands more in aid distribution centres in Gaza. Over the weekend, dozens more Palestinians were killed while trying to access humanitarian aid. Why is the government still permitting the transfer of F-35 components to Israel through the international pool, knowing these aircraft may be used in operation, causing mass civilian casualties?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've set out the reasons why the government has had to make special measures in order to ensure that the F-35 programme continued to operate, including our continued role in the global supply, the global spares pool, which is in the United States. But I agree with the sentiments of the Honourable Lady's constituent. Clearly, the deaths around aid distribution centres are horrifying, and there needs to be a full investigation, action taken. But vitally, aid must get into Gaza at the scale required from enough distribution centres in order to try and avoid the horrifying scenes that so many have seen.
Chair of the Select Committee, Emily Thornbury.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We must not forget Gaza, despite the fact that the eyes of the world are now turned to the Iran-Israel war. It's very important that we continue to remember the suffering of the Gazans and we continue to move on it. As a witness to my committee said, there is lethal chaos in Gaza, a witness from MSF. But there is one read across, I think, from the Iran-Israel war, which I think we should learn from, which is the clear closeness between Israel and America and the fact that America can influence Israel. Yes. In our conversations with the Americans, can I ask the Minister to ensure that we continue to say to the Americans not to give up on Gaza and to use their influence to ensure that the Israelis do the right thing? There must be peace and the hostages must come home.
Yeah. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government will not give up on Gaza. I can confirm that my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, has raised Gaza in his engagements with the US. I have not forgotten about Gaza and was speaking to Palestinian counterparts just last night. The situation in Gaza will remain a top priority for this government.
Mr. Speaker, Israel dealing with Hamas and Hezbollah is to be welcomed. But what is not to be welcomed is the continuing blockage of medical and humanitarian aid into Gaza. Whilst we continue to talk, children continue to die. And I hope that the Foreign Secretary will make it very, very clear that the continuation of children dying every single day is unacceptable, that he will stand up to the White House and the State Department and the Pentagon. He will stand up to the Knesset and to the current Israeli government of Netanyahu. The current deaths are just going on and on and on. How many more children need to die before something changes?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, the Foreign Secretary has raised these issues both with his American counterparts and indeed his Israeli counterparts, and I have done the same. We remain steely focused on the situation in Gaza, including the tragic scenes about the deprivation of aid and the impact that is having on civilians right across the Strip, including children. We are trying to take every measure we can to try and reduce that suffering, including aid in where it can be brought in, aid into the region where that is the most appropriate way to reach the medically vulnerable, and in a few small cases ensuring that Gazan children can access medical assistance here.
Shadow Secretary of State David Patel.
Mr. Speaker, the humanitarian situation in Gaza simply cannot continue, and we spent a lot of time in this House discussing the extent of the humanitarian situation and the fact that food and essential supplies are not getting into support innocent victims. Can I specifically ask the Minister, what discussions has he put to Israel and what proposals has he put for the opening of specific crossing points for aid delivery into Gaza? And can he give his assessment as to why he thinks the Israeli government may not be listening to this country and our government on this particular issue?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the disagreement between the Israeli government is not simply with the British government. It was with a wide range of their partners. As I know, the Right Honourable Lady is aware, we signed a statement with 26 partners about the humanitarian situation. We did a leaders-level statement with France and Canada. There is a wide disagreement with the approach that the Israeli government are taking in relation to aid distribution. The Foreign Secretary discussed these matters, including entry points, with the Foreign Minister of Israel just over the weekend. We would like to see the Israeli government shift position, it is clear, for the reasons that the Right Honourable Lady says, that that shift must come urgently.
Callum Miller, Liberal Democrats spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Thursday, I received a message from Mohammed, an NHS doctor with family in Gaza. He wrote, "My 16-year-old nephew was missing for 5 days after heading out to retrieve humanitarian aid at a location announced by Israeli forces. We found him dead yesterday, his body mutilated, eaten by stray dogs. He died alone. No one could reach him or others like him in time. He was only a boy who desperately wanted to get food for his starving family." On the 10th of June, the Minister sanctioned 2 ministers who advocated for the blockade of Gaza, noting that this will not remove Hamas nor ensure the hostages are released. But nothing has changed. So what further steps is the government taking today to signal to the government of Israel that the UK will not stand idly by while children in Gaza are starved, denied medicine or killed as they seek food for their families?
The Honourable Gentleman shares with the House a heartbreaking story, and I know it is one of thousands of lives lost in Gaza. The situation is intolerable, and we will continue to take further action. As I said, the Foreign Secretary raised this issue with the Foreign Minister on Sunday. Clearly, there have been significant developments in the Middle East since the 10th of June. This is now the time for Israel to implement a ceasefire, allow aid in, Hamas to release hostages, and for us to try and draw a line over the horrifying suffering of Mohammed and many others like him.
Number
2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government is strengthening ties with our European allies to deliver mutual benefits for our prosperity and security. And as the Strategic Defence Review laid out, we need a resilient and competitive European defence industrial base to deliver the capabilities we need at speed and scale. With that UK-EU security and defence partnership now agreed, securing UK's swift participation in SAFE is a priority for the government. And of course, these partnerships complement and reinforce NATO's role as the cornerstone of Euro-Atlantic security.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In an increasingly unstable world, working with our European allies on defence and weapons production is vital for our security and our economy. If investment is needed, it should not stand in the way of the opportunity to support UK defence manufacturers, enable joint R&D and promote Britain's strategic interests on the global stage. My question to the Minister is, what recent discussions has he had with European counterparts about ensuring the UK has access to the Security Action for Europe Fund?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've been having regular conversations, as has the Foreign Secretary and colleagues across the MOD and the Cabinet Office. I was in Poland just last week discussing with our Polish allies our important collaboration. And of course, the week before that in Rome with the Weimar Plus group. So these are active and ongoing conversations, and they are absolutely crucial. I agree with him at a time of such geopolitical uncertainty.
Number 3, Mr. Speaker, please. Thank you.
Secretary of State.
We're proud to be founding partners of Gavi. We've invested over $5 billion since 2000, helping to immunise over 1 billion children. Gavi's enjoyed good cross-party support in this House, and I'm looking forward to updating the House accordingly.
Sean.
Mr. Speaker, I can thank the Secretary of State Foreign Secretary very much for his response. I very much warmly welcome the Prime Minister's repeated assurances that vaccination remains an international development priority, and also with the Foreign Secretary as to the day ahead of tomorrow's high-level pledging summit. Does the Minister agree with me that the UK must continue to make a significant contribution to Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, to ensure that millions of children are protected from some of the world's deadliest yet treatable diseases, such as malaria? Thank you so much.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm not going to anticipate the announcement that we may make tomorrow, but I'm hugely grateful that the Honourable Gentleman has raised this issue. We are a proud founding member of the Global Fund. We were very pleased to co-host the Global Fund's 8th replenishment alongside South Africa, and I look forward to making an announcement very shortly.
Lisa Smart.
Question 4, Mr. Speaker.
Foreign Secretary.
We've renewed engagement with our allies to pursue all lawful avenues to make Russia pay for Putin's illegal war on Ukraine. And I've engaged with partners on this as G7 foreign ministers, and I look forward to speaking to partners at the NATO Hague Summit later on today.
Mr. Smart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I saw for myself the impact of Russia's barbarism in Kyiv and Chernihiv last month, and I heard directly from some of those brave Ukrainians who had been subject to war crimes in Yehidny. There is a lot going on in the world at the moment, but what assurances can the Foreign Secretary give the House and those Ukrainians waiting to be able to go home that he is straining every sinew so that Russia pays for its crimes and pays for its war crimes?
Sarah Stace.
Our support is ironclad. She will have seen our continuing package of sanctions on Russia. She will recognise that this will be central to our discussions at NATO later on today and tomorrow. And can I say to her, whether it's at the G7, whether it's at NATO, whether it's at Weimar Plus, the UK continues to lead on this critical issue, not just for Ukraine, but for European security.
Anna Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the honourable gentleman consider further sanctions on the Russian regime for the forced deportation of Ukrainian children? In recent peace talks, the Russian delegation proposed an exchange of prisoners of war for Ukrainian children that had been stolen from their homes, equating combatants with children who receive special protected status under international law. Is this not horrific? And does he share my concern that 53,000 Ukrainian children are expected to attend summer camps in Russia this summer, from which they are unlikely to return to their homes?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for continuing to prosecute this issue and raise it at every opportunity. It's a heinous crime. We have already sanctioned some of the individuals that lie behind it. I won't comment on future sanctions, but of course we keep this under full consideration, and it will also be a topic of discussion, both with the Ukrainian foreign ministers and with NATO ministers later on today.
Foreign Secretary Dempsey Patel.
Mr. Speaker, Ukraine has bravely fought back Putin's illegal invasion, and that is with our undoubted support. Can the Foreign Secretary just give an update on what action is actually underway to release the billions of pounds of frozen Russian assets? And on the subject of Russian threats and malign influence, he will be alarmed to know that the political opposition leaders in Georgia have been arrested and imprisoned this week. What steps is the government taking in response, and will further sanctions follow and be considered to curtail Putin's absolute abuse of democracy in Europe?
Foreign Secretary.
What can I say to the right honourable lady that my honourable friend, the Minister for Europe, has condemned what took place in Georgia over the last few days, and I endorse that condemnation. She will recognise that on the issue of Russian assets, we are engaged particularly with European colleagues who are more exposed than we are. And it has been right to allow new governments in Europe to take their place and to consider the issues, because it does require some technical understanding. But we continue to press it, and it will be a topic at NATO later on today.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Colombian.
Mr. Speaker, over the weekend, while the world's attention was fixated on the escalating conflict in the Middle East, President Putin restated publicly his desire to conquer the whole of Ukraine and his readiness to use nuclear weapons against Kyiv. I welcome the Foreign Secretary's assurance that he is maintaining a focus on Putin's barbaric war against Ukraine. The Secretary of State has previously told the House that Germany and Belgium are the blockers to international agreement on seizing frozen Russian assets. So can he set out how he and the Prime Minister will raise this proposal with his Belgian and German counterparts at the NATO summit? And will he let us know whether he has considered replicating the proposals by the EU to extract billions of euros more from those assets by moving them into higher yielding investments?
Secretary.
It's important to recognise that within the European Union, they have just come forward with a new sanctions package. and I congratulate them for that 18th package, given that he will recognise that there have been countries like Hungary that have been backmarkers and blockers on this particular issue. He's heard what I've said on Russian assets. It's been important for new governments to be able to consider these things afresh and get up to technical speed. The way forward must be to pool those assets so all of us bear joint liability, as it were, and these discussions continue apace.
Well,
Question number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We are steadfast in our support for women and girls. The appointment of Baroness Harman as Special Envoy underscores this commitment, and we're focusing much of our effort on the most marginalised women and girls who are disproportionately affected by ongoing conflicts and crises. For example, food assistance to 800,000 displaced people on the Chad-Sudan border, almost 90% of whom are women and children.
Well,
Mr. Speaker, yesterday we welcomed an ambitious and much needed industrial strategy which will rely on bold trade deals with countries around the world. Britain has a strong tradition of promoting human rights in its work around the world, so can the Minister tell me how the FCDO is ensuring we uphold our commitment to rights for girls and women as we're developing trade deals with other countries?
Minister.
We're using our influence to unlock the full potential of women to participate in the economy. This includes working to include gender provisions in newly negotiated free trade agreements, and we're supporting women-led businesses to realise the benefits of trade. The Developing Countries Trading Scheme provides for 0% tariffs, disproportionately supporting smaller, women-led businesses in low-income countries.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. I should like to know what steps the Foreign Office is taking to protect women and girls in this country. There can be no better candidates for deportation than non-UK nationals who have violently raped children here. After the Casey report into the gang scandal last week, ministers promised that they would do everything they could to get the men involved deported. So can the Foreign Secretary confirm that he has already told Pakistan that British aid and diplomatic visas will be withdrawn if convicted rapists are not taken back?
Minister, have you got something to add to the question?
I think this is probably a Home Office question, but we will do all that we can in the Foreign Office to support anything which supports victims and brings people to justice.
Right, Wyndham Morton, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Education is a basic right, and ensuring quality education for every girl is essential to building a more equitable world. In 2023 in Government, we launched the Women and Girls Strategy to deliver on the 3 E's: education, empowering women and girls, and ending violence. Does the Minister stand by the commitment to ensure that at least 50% of aid reaches women and girls? And most importantly, will she confirm the 2025-26 ODA spending for global education following the spending review?
Minister.
We are committed to supporting women in all that we do, and we are supporting, for example, 200,000 displaced children with education interventions in Sudan and reaching Sudanese refugee populations in 6 countries through £14 million of funding for Education Cannot Wait, which I think she may know from when she was a minister, or was that one of the programmes which she cut when she was a minister? But the UK support through the International Finance Facility for Education will unlock up to £1 billion in additional and affordable education, and our equality impact assessment will be published shortly so that she can analyse the exact pounds and pence.
Brian Leishman.
Question 7, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the UK operates one of the most robust export control regimes in the world. One of our first acts in government was to review and suspend export licences that could be used by the IDF in Gaza. We have successfully implemented that suspension and continue to refuse relevant licence applications. All export licences are kept under careful and continual review, and we can suspend, refuse or revoke licences as required.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The war criminals of Benjamin Netanyahu's government are carrying out the most vile human rights abuse and genocide. At the same time, the UK carry out the training of Israeli military personnel, facilitate almost daily spy flights that provide intelligence, and there is a continued exporting of military equipment to Israel. With all of that, Mr Speaker, I ask the Minister if the Government will support an independent public inquiry into UK involvement in Israeli military operations in Gaza.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I think it's important to be focused on the facts at issue. We're not supporting spy flights. We have a limited presence in order to try and find hostages in Gaza for reasons that the whole House would understand and support. There are less than 10 IDF personnel receiving any training in the UK, and that training is academic and non-military in its nature. We are not arming Israel's war in Gaza. We categorically do not export any bombs or ammunition for use in military operations in Gaza. My honourable friend asked about an independent inquiry. The government welcomes scrutiny. I welcome my time in this chamber. And on the questions at issue in relation to the arms sales, including in relation to the F-35 programme, there is a judicial review on which we will hear findings shortly. There is plenty of scrutiny on this government on these issues.
George.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Sorry, I didn't catch it straight away. Would the government let us know what assessment they've made of Israel's stockpile of nuclear weapons?
Minister.
I think, Mr Speaker, that the honourable gentleman will understand why I wouldn't comment on these issues from the dispatch box.
Brian Matthew.
Question number 8, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. Our work on water, sanitation and hygiene helps deliver development objectives on global health, climate and growth. We are supporting 8 countries in Africa and Asia to develop climate-resilient water, sanitation and hygiene services and prevent the spread of diseases, including cholera. We're working through the World Bank and through the Water Global Challenge programme to reach 300 million people with water services by 2030.
Brian Matthews.
Mr Speaker, a recent polling by WaterAid and YouGov shows that access to water, sanitation and hygiene is the #1 priority the UK public want to see funded through UK aid. This makes sense given that water underpins global health, keeps girls in school and builds climate resilient communities. So does the Minister agree it's one of the smartest and most cost-effective ways to deliver the UK's development goals? Because without access to safe water, sanitation and hygiene, there could be no meaningful progress in any of these areas. Thank you.
Minister. Well, Mr Speaker, he makes very important points. I've had the pleasure of seeing very many important water and sanitation projects in my previous career, and we are very much focused on maintaining our impact by focusing on partnerships with governments and multilaterals and establishing the conditions that can secure additional domestic funding and private investment in these areas. And he rightly makes that link between water and sanitation and health, and that will of course be considered as we approach the allocations of the funding into the future.
Sir John Hayes.
9, Mr Speaker. Yeah.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, with your permission, I'll answer questions 9, 10 and 14 together. The Diego Garcia military base deal secures the future of the strategically critical US-UK military base. It will protect our national security for generations and ensure we maintain vital capabilities. It's our most significant contribution to the transatlantic defence and security partnership and has been strengthened since our agreement with the previous Mauritian government, and the deal indeed under discussion by the previous government. The payments will be split between the FCDO and MOD and published in the usual way. And of course the opposition understands the jeopardy facing the base and the necessity of this treaty, which is why they started negotiating in the first place.
Sir John Hayes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Foreign Secretary is an old friend of the man for Lincoln, a Lincolnshire neighbour who in all his innocence I regard with a degree of paternal care. And so I asked this question more in sorrow than in anger. And this assumption, rooted in the government's statements, is that unless we do a deal with Mauritius, the International Telecommunications Union could decide that Mauritius is sovereign and deny access to both the US and the UK. This is fundamentally untrue. The ITU has no competence in that regard, is ignored by the US already. So I want us to confirm that that argument is entirely bogus. And this is not a deal. This is not diplomacy. This is a disgrace.
Minister.
Well, I thoroughly reject that statement by the honourable gentleman. He knows I have a lot of respect for him, but I'm afraid he's completely mistaken on this. And the fact is the courts were already making decisions that undermined our position. Legally binding provisional measures could have come within weeks, affecting the operational ability of our base to function as it was. And of course, we believe that an inevitable binding judgment would follow. The deal has been done. This House is now scrutinising it. I've appeared before 2 committees in recent weeks, Mr. Speaker, and of course there'll be further such scrutiny over the weeks ahead.
Stuart Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister confirm, under the current circumstances, if the US want to launch an attack on Iran from Diego Garcia, will the UK government support it?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the Foreign Secretary has made absolutely clear, there was no UK involvement in the US strikes on Iran. He will understand we don't comment on private conversations with our allies or on hypothetical operations.
David Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had hoped for a more precise answer to my question. So rather than pressing again for exact figures or a departmental breakdown, let me proceed down a related line of inquiry and ask this. Is there any mechanism, legal or otherwise, that the Mauritian government could use to reopen the Chagos negotiation or to request further financial or material assistance in a way that could result in additional costs for the British taxpayer?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, I've set out the costs very, very clearly. They average out at 101 million over the course of the deal. That compares very favourably with, for example, what France pays for its military facility in Djibouti. This treaty has been entered into in good faith between the UK and Mauritius. It will be legally binding, and we're absolutely clear that it's compliant with international law and all of our other obligations.
Mr. Speaker, when the Foreign Affairs Committee were recently in Washington, we raised the Diego Garcia deal with the administration. And, Mr. Speaker, they could not have been more enthusiastic for this deal because they recognise that it secures our strategic interests in the area. Does the Minister agree with me that it's maybe time for the people in the benches opposite, the members in the benches opposite, to stop playing politics with national defence?
Reversed it round.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I couldn't agree more. This deal is supported by the United States, it's supported by our Five Eyes partners, it's supported by India. It secures our national security, the security of our allies and this base well into the next century. As I've said repeatedly many, many times, if there wasn't a problem, why did the previous government start negotiating?
Shadow Minister Andrew Ross.
Mr. Speaker, Labour's surrender of British sovereignty has been welcomed by China, Russia and Iran, and now we learn that the UK will have to notify Mauritius of any military operations coming from Diego Garcia jeopardising our national security. Far from upholding our international obligations, this treaty is a shameful betrayal of British Chagossians, with no guarantee of access to Mauritian-controlled 40 million of trust fund, while British taxpayers fork out 30 billion to subsidise tax cuts in Mauritius. So, I ask the Minister, why won't the government allow this House a proper debate and a vote before the 21-day CRAG deadline next week? And shouldn't we actually keep the Chagos Islands British and under the protection of the Crown? Wouldn't that be a better policy?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, half of his question was rhetoric and half of it was completely wrong, and he might want to consider correcting the record on a number of points. We do not have to inform Mauritius before undertaking military action from the base. It's regarding expedition information after actions. There is no fettering of our ability to operate from there. The costs he quoted were simply wrong. It's 101 million averaged over. The total net present value of the payments is 3.4 billion. There have been all sorts of wild figures pasted around, Mr. Speaker. They don't reflect the reality. This is considered by the government actuaries, and I really, really do hope, given the wide geopolitical threats that this country and our allies face at the moment, that he would come with some more serious questions.
Oliver Ryan.
Question number 11, please.
Well done.
Foreign Secretary.
The United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia are historic allies with a modern partnership. I met His Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan immediately after the first Israeli strike, signifying the significance, strength and trust in the relationship, and the Prime Minister visited Riyadh for his first Strategic Partnership Council with His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, where he committed to an ambitious programme of cooperation and enhanced mutual prosperity.
Oliver Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the the Secretary of State, for that answer and declare my interest as the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is an important partner for trade, for peace in the Middle East, and for the combating of terrorism around the world. With reference to recent events in Iran, how is the Foreign Secretary utilising our relationship, involving the Saudi government in our own de-escalation efforts in the region?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I found it hugely beneficial to be able to speak to His Highness Prince Faisal so closely over the last few days at the outbreak of this crisis, and then again in the last 48 hours. We stay in close touch. They're a key ally, and of course we were worried about how the situation would affect regional allies like Saudi Arabia. But there's so much that we can do together, not just on security, of course, on trade. Our trade has grown by 70%, and we remain committed to growing our total trade to 30 billion by 2030.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Creation of the Abraham Accords was one of the achievements of the first Trump administration, and the President of the US has said that he aims for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to join those accords. What is the UK government doing to encourage that process, and what preconditions does he believe Riyadh has for joining the accords?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the honourable gentleman raises a good question, and we should remember when thinking about October the 7th that one of the objectives of Hamas was to tear apart the prospects of normalisation in the region. And notwithstanding the horrors and the pain that the crisis in the region has over these last months, the Abraham Accords and the changed relationship with so many Gulf partners particularly, but also other Muslim countries and Israel is important to keep hold of. We continue to discuss these issues, but there are no prospects until we get to a ceasefire.
Lewis Atkins.
Number 12, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the safety of British nationals is our first priority. We are providing support and advice to more than 1,000 British nationals as they seek to leave the region by land and air. We have deployed teams to Israel, Cyprus, Egypt and Jordan. Our embassy in Tehran has been temporarily withdrawn, but continues to provide support to British nationals in Iran remotely. We have bolstered teams in neighbouring countries to support British nationals seeking to get to safety. And when Israeli airspace opened yesterday, we ran our first RAF evacuation flight, and I can confirm to the House now that we will fly another today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. British nationals in Israel, including the daughter of my constituents, remain concerned about their safety. Advice has been for British citizens to make their way to Egypt via the border, but I think there's been some reports that the Israeli government have suggested those journeys would be unsafe. I wonder if the Minister could clarify the advice to British citizens in that situation.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, travel advice is the best source of advice for British nationals in Israel. There are options for leaving by land, as my honourable friend's constituent is aware. There are now options for leaving by air as well, but as you will understand, as the whole House will understand, the flow of flights out of Israel still remain limited. British nationals in Israel will want to make their own judgments about whether they will want to wait for a flight or make a land journey, and my officials are available to advise every constituent on the options before them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Two of my constituents are currently in Tehran, but they say that fuel shortages, long queues and poor internet access, as well as closed airspace, have made it almost impossible for them to leave Iran. They urgently need clear guidance, they need a way to formally register their presence, and they need consular support, which they're struggling to access. So will the Minister urgently meet with me to ensure that my constituents get the assistance they need from the government to come back home safely to Eastbourne?
Minister.
I'm, of course, very happy to meet with the honourable gentleman. The whole House knows we have advised against all travel to Iran for some time and been clear that our ability to provide consular assistance is very limited in Iran for those reasons, particularly with the temporary withdrawal of our embassy. For those in Iran, we would encourage them to be in touch with the Foreign Office. We will provide what advice and support we can, and I'm, of course, happy to meet with the Honourable Gentleman.
John Mill.
Question 13, Mr Speaker.
Who wants it? Minister, welcome back.
Forgive me, Mr Speaker. We are committed to recognising a Palestinian state at a time that has the most impact and is most conducive to long-term prospects for peace. UK bilateral recognition is the single most important action we can take towards Palestinian statehood, and that is why it is important to get the timing right, so it creates genuine momentum and is not simply a symbolic gesture.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What's happening in Gaza is hard enough to watch, but if we're to prevent the West Bank going the same way in a few years' time, we must act today. Would the Minister agree that recognising the principle of a Palestinian state without making any judgment for the moment on its borders is the strongest and most effective way to reaffirm the UK's long-standing commitment to a two-state solution while there is still territory left to form it with?
Minister.
The Honourable Gentleman makes important points about the situation in the West Bank, points that we've discussed in this chamber before. We have condemned the expansion of violence and the expansion of illegal settlements in the West Bank. There are a range of issues with which we profoundly disagree with the Israeli government in relation to their approach to West Bank issues, and we will continue to raise these issues with force. And I refer him to my previous answer about recognition.
Debbie Abrahams.
Honourable friend, update me in terms of the conference that was due to be held at the weekend following the bombing of Iran by Israel, where this was the potential for recognition was being discussed.
Minister.
I think my right honourable friend refers to the two-state solution conference due to take place in New York last week. It has been suspended given events in the region for understandable reasons by its French and Saudi co-hosts. We expect that it will be rearranged, and I've been in conversation with my Saudi colleagues about when that might be.
Stella Creasy.
Question number 15, Mr Speaker.
Foreign Secretary.
I'm committed to securing Abdel Fattah's release. I was committed to this before coming to power, and I remain committed now. The government is engaging intensively on this case. I raise Allah's imprisonment every time I'm in contact with my Egyptian counterpart, and the Prime Minister has raised it on several conversations with President Sisi.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I think everybody in this chamber, including the Foreign Secretary, is desperately worried about the health of Layla Suif, who has felt that she's had no choice but to be on hunger strike since her son Alaa should have been released last September and is in and out of hospital, desperately ill, dying in slow motion, as her daughter says. I welcome very much the work that the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister have done on this case and the previous commitments that they've made. As he knows, the Egyptians have remained steadfast in their objections, so can he now confirm that he's considering all options to secure Alaa's release, including changing the Foreign Office travel advice for Egypt to highlight the risk of arbitrary detention so that no other family is put through this kind of anguish?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that this case and Layla's condition has concerned me greatly. It's been a top priority every week that I've been in office, at every single level. Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary, Minister, National Security Advisor, we are engaged with the Egyptians. I believe our strategy is working, but clearly, given Layla's health, we must see progress at pace with the Egyptian government.
Brendan O'Hara.
Mr Speaker, I recall before he became Foreign Secretary, when he asked the previous government what diplomatic price has Egypt paid for the arbitrary detention of Alaa, before demanding that serious diplomatic consequences should be put on Egypt should they not release him. Alaa's mother is 278 days into her hunger strike and is critically ill. So can I ask him that since he became Foreign Secretary, What diplomatic price has Egypt paid? And what have been those serious diplomatic consequences he can point to that Egypt have been forced to pay since July of last year?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, can I reassure him that I remain in close touch with Layla and the family? Can I reassure him that this is a #1 priority for me, and I expect to see him released? And can I also just gently remind him that he has stood up time after time, raised his concerns in Gaza, and he will understand if he wants the UK government to have the effect in Gaza, we must have relations with the Egyptians.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are clear that Israel must immediately allow rapid and unhindered aid into Gaza, including desperately needed medical supplies. The UK continues to support the delivery of medical assistance through trusted partners, including UK Med, who've completed over 500,000 patient consultations in Gaza since January 2024, and we will continue to assess how we can best support those in need.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Foreign Secretary will understand that I wrote to him on the 18th of June asking him if he would meet Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, who has assembled a children's hospital in prefabricated form in Jordan. It is ready to go into Gaza. It will be able to help the 400,000 children in northern Gaza who at the moment have no access to any medical facilities at all. This is desperately urgent. Can I ask him to meet with Dr. Mustafa in order to familiarise himself with the opportunity here of doing something practical and good to help desperate children in northern Gaza?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his continued engagement on these questions. We have discussed at this dispatch box many times the restrictions on aid getting into Gaza, including in relation to construction materials. I'm very happy to take a further look at this specific proposal and see if there's anything we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Al-Hali Hospital in Gaza, which is run by the Anglican Church in Jerusalem, has repeatedly been bombed. Earlier this month, the hospital's compound was hit, killing 5 people, including a father escorting his son to surgery. The Minister has spoken much about the need for aid to get in, but I'd like him to just set out what concrete actions he is going to take now, because saying Israel must do something doesn't mean they're going to act. So I want to know what action is he going to take to ensure that the attacks on our hospitals, medics and patients ends. Well said.
Mr. Speaker, I want nothing more than the attacks on hospitals, on medical personnel, on aid workers to end. My honourable friend is absolutely right to say that I have said many times from this dispatch box that I want that to be the case, and yet these strikes have continued. We continue to raise these issues with the Israeli government. We have taken a series of actions, many of which we've discussed already over the course of this morning, and we will continue to take actions until things change. Until things change, this government will not be satisfied.
Come to Topicals, Daniel Francis.
Mr. Speaker, Britain is at the heart of diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation in the Middle East. We are clear that Iran must never have a nuclear weapon. While at the UK, EU, G7 and NATO summits, and in my engagements for the High North to North Africa, the government has been delivering security and growth for the British people, deepening Britain's partnerships and alliances, and addressing the ongoing horrendous conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine.
Francis.
Speaker, I know this House, along with my constituents across Bexley and Crayford, welcome the sanctions taken against 2 Israeli officials earlier this month. So can I therefore ask my honourable friend what discussions the UK government is holding with our international partners regarding further actions that could be taken in relation to the incitement of violence against Palestinian citizens?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for the question. He will have seen that on taking those sanctions against Ben Gvir and Smodrick, we worked with Australia, Canada, New Zealand and Norway to do that. I can't speculate on future sanctions, but I can assure him that we are coordinating with our allies, and he will know that on the issue of humanitarian aid, for example, 26 countries joined us.
Foreign Secretary Dame Priti Patel.
Mr. Speaker, given the clear threat Iran poses to the United Kingdom, our allies and to the Middle East, does the Foreign Secretary support the actions undertaken by the United States to degrade Iran's nuclear weapons? And he will also have heard that President Trump has said that Iran's nuclear capabilities are gone. Does he welcome this?
Foreign Secretary.
It was important to be alongside Secretary of State Rubio last week in DC. We continue to work closely with President Trump, and the Prime Minister spoke to him just 2 days ago. And of course, the initial assessments of those attacks in Iran are coming in, and we will assess that in due course.
Dame Priti Patel.
Mr. Speaker, given the situation that has emerged in the Middle East and the fact that the de-escalation has not taken place in recent hours, can the Foreign Secretary outline what is now effectively going to be quite an urgent situation in terms of measures that he's overseeing to bring back 4,000 British nationals now stranded in Israel? He will have received, as I have, large volumes of correspondence overnight from concerned families. What immediate steps are going to be taken? I understand that another plane has been put in place, but we're now speaking about 4,000 British nationals who are clearly stuck in Israel.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I was very pleased to see that flight came in from Birmingham. We will do all we can to work with the Israeli government to open airspace and to continue flights. We have a ceasefire. I have seen, of course, that ceasefire has been violated, and I urge all partners to keep to that ceasefire so airspace can open up and commercial flights can resume.
Chris Hinsliff.
Mr. Speaker, many of my constituents have raised concerns about the use of RAF Akrotiri to support Israel military activity in Gaza. Given the rapidly developing situation with Iran, can ministers assure this House that British arms and military bases will not be likewise implicated in any further escalations of that conflict?
Foreign Secretary.
I can't comment on hypotheticals. But I can assure him that we will do all we can to protect our assets and our troops in the region and always to stay within international law.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UN Children in Conflict report showed that violence against children increased by 25% last year. It doesn't even include what's going on this year. The Israeli government is listed as the most prolific perpetrator of grave violations against children for a second year running, making it the most dangerous place on earth to be a child. What specific steps is the Foreign Secretary taking to protect children in conflict in Gaza and elsewhere like Somalia and Haiti?
Minister.
The Honourable Lady raises vital questions about the status of children in Gaza, and in response to one of her colleagues, I set out some of the measures that we have taken already. Clearly, children in Gaza, like all civilians in Gaza, are under the most enormous pressure at the moment, and aid getting in is a vital next step. Where children from Gaza are outside of the region, so in particular in Egypt and Jordan, we have provided support to them there, and in a very limited set of cases where specialist medical attention that is only possible from the UK is the case, in a few limited cases, we have brought children from Gaza to the UK.
Mr. Speaker, almost daily now we hear reports of Israeli forces opening fire near aid distribution sites in Gaza. People cannot even access basic food supplies without risking their lives. Given the horrific level of suffering we can all see taking place, is it not time, Minister, to end all arms sales to Israel and to recognise the state of Palestine?
Foreign Secretary.
We have banned arms sales that could be used in Gaza. I'd want to reassure honourable friend of that. We liaise with the French and the Saudi Arabians despite the suspension of their conference. I think the intention is to resume in September.
Lexington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the Foreign Affairs Committee yesterday, the Minister for the Overseas Territories was unable to give clear guarantees on the future of the marine protected area once sovereignty is surrendered to Mauritius. Does the Foreign Secretary accept that his Chagos surrender deal does not currently secure the marine environment, and that a future environmental protection agreement may result in the UK paying even more money to Mauritius?
Minister.
Well, it's a shame the tone of his question, Mr. Speaker. I thought we had a very constructive conversation yesterday, and I took on board the points that he and the chair of the committee raised. I can assure him that that marine protected area is a key part of our agreement with Mauritius, and this government is committed to protecting our oceans and natural resources globally.
Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tulsi Gabbard, US's Director of Intelligence, said in March that Iran was not building a nuclear weapons, as did the UN Atomic Energy. But a day before, conference to recognise Palestine, Israel decides unilaterally that Iran has nuclear weapons and there was an immediate threat of attack, and therefore it bombed Iran. The illegal bombing by Israel was a distraction from the shooting and killing of starving Palestinians and to prevent the recognition of State of Palestine. So can I ask the Minister?
Sean Punchy, quick.
Thank you. Can I ask the Minister what steps are you taking to stop this killing of Palestinians and to recognise the State of Palestine?
Secretary.
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that it is important to recognise that in our own country, at Sizewell, at Urenco, uranium is enriched between 3 to 5%. The IAEA has found 60% enrichment in Iran. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. We are doing all we can diplomatically to get a negotiated settlement to that problem, and of course we continue to press for aid to the Palestinians.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The ministers have collectively restated their commitment to a two-state solution in the Israel-Palestine conflict, but only one of those states is currently recognised. I believe there's support in this House for it, and if it was put to a vote, that would be expressed. Would that not strengthen their hand, and will the Minister bring it to a vote?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've discussed these issues many times. My honourable friend asked me earlier why, when we say things at this dispatch box, do they not happen? It is the view of this House is clearly very important on the question of a two-state solution, but it is the job of Foreign Office ministers to try and make it a reality in practice through diplomacy.
Boynton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister join me in welcoming the ceasefire between Israel and Iran announced by President Trump? And although clearly the situation remains fragile, does he see an opportunity to restore stability, to develop a diplomatic solution to Iran's nuclear programme and ensuring Iran never ever has access to nuclear weapons?
Foreign Secretary.
Yes, I do.
Shocker Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this month, the US President ordered the brutal ICE raids in Los Angeles. He called those protesting against these raids as paid insurrectionists and criminal invaders. And a few days later, a gunman assassinated Democratic politician Melissa Holtman. In recent months, figures associated with the US President have spread disinformation and polarising rhetoric via social media, even targeting a government minister. I'm sure the Minister, Secretary of State, would agree this level of political violence cannot be imposed to the UK.
Order. It's topicals. I've got to get other people in. They're meant to be short and punchy. Please, let's see a quick answer now from the Foreign Secretary.
Well, just as you wouldn't expect members of Congress or the Senate to comment on domestic issues with our own country, I'm not going to stray into domestic issues in the US. They remain our closest of allies.
Elena Ward.
Speaker, and I pay tribute to the work of the Foreign Secretary and his team for all their diplomatic effort on de-escalation in the Middle East. With the rules-based order under enormous strain, it matters more than ever that we act to uphold international law and multilateral institutions. It's almost a year since the ICJ handed down their judgment on the illegality of Israel's occupation of Palestine. Let me ask the Minister, given that senior government ministers received advice last year on the implications for the UK, when can we expect a decision on the government's response?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I recognise the appetite of the Chamber to hear more about the ICJ advisory opinion. It was a far-reaching and complex judgment, and we're taking our time in our response.
Sir Julian Lewis.
What practical steps can the government take to support women and girls in Afghanistan who, after a period of being encouraged to liberate themselves, are now cast back into domestic servitude?
Mr. Speaker, it's an incredibly important question. As I think some in the House know, I negotiated with the Taliban when I was an official. It is a source of incredible personal frustration to me that the situation in Afghanistan for women has got worse and worse as the months have drawn on in Afghanistan. The Taliban need to change course, not just for the rights of women, but for the very viability of their economy and their country.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Minister for the Indo-Pacific for her support for the family of Simone White, who tragically died last year after drinking a free vodka shot in Laos. I hear very worrying reports that the hostel where this happened is due to reopen shortly under another name. Can I ask the Minister what assurance she can give me and the family that everything is being done to hold those involved accountable and to keep travellers safe from the dangers of methanol poisoning?
Well, Mr. Speaker, could I thank the hard-working MP for his constituents? And I met with Simone's family on the 14th of May, and of course, as he's aware, I did also meet with the Minister responsible in Vientiane, and I will raise his specific point today as a result of his intervention this morning.
Glynis Maddy.
Holyhead Towing in my constituency have vessels in the Middle East, specifically in Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE. The company are keeping their crew updated to the best of their knowledge. What official advice or guidance is available for UK maritime operators working in the region?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I said before, travel advice is the surest and most regularly updated advice for British nationals in the region. We did change travel advice yesterday in relation to Qatar, as my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, announced in the House. We hope, as the Foreign Secretary has said already this morning, that there will now be greater stability in the region, that the ceasefire holds, and that British nationals in the region are not so concerned, but travel advice is the best place to look.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. The All-Party Parliamentary Group for Africa, which I chair, recently published its report on Africa's just energy transition to accessible and renewable and clean energy. What assessments has the Minister made of its report's 9 recommendations? For example, reforming carbon markets to work in Africa's interest and also ensuring international development funding is blended with private sector funding to invest in that transition.
Secretary.
Well, can I begin by congratulating my honourable friend for her elevation recently. Can I thank her for her work on the APPG, and can I assure her that we will review her report as part of our new Africa approach?
Sir James Cleverly.
Dame Karen Pierce is one of our most senior and experienced diplomats, and I very much welcomed her appointment to be an envoy to the Western Balkans. But since her appointment, we have heard precious little from his department. So can he reassure this House that we have not lost interest in the Western Balkans?
Can I assure the right honourable gentleman, having been to the region twice and going back soon within the next 6 weeks, that we've absolutely not lost interest. And of course, Dame Karen Pierce is at the centre of that, alongside the Berlin process that we'll be hosting later on this year.
Gurinder Singh Jaffa.
Recent successful UK-India trade deal, FCDO coordination with India on crisis diplomacy has never been more important, particularly following the recent terrorist attack, the Air India plane crash and human rights concern, including the case of Jagtar Singh Joe. Can the Secretary of State explain how security cooperation and consular support are being pursued in light of the trade deal?
Mr. Speaker, could I firstly say how deeply shocked and saddened we all were by the devastating plane crash in Ahmedabad. The Foreign Secretary visited India in his first month in office, and since then, of course, we've agreed that groundbreaking technology security initiative and the free trade agreement, as he said. And on the question of some of the human rights and the case of Jagtar Singh Johal, I will be meeting with the member for the family from West Dunbartonshire in hopefully this week or next, whenever our diaries can align.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What does it say to Britain's allies and to our enemies that neither the Foreign Secretary nor the Prime Minister can bring themselves to say that the strikes against Iran were right and cannot say that they were legal?
Foreign Secretary.
Say to the honourable gentleman, I have spoken to Secretary Rubio every single week that I've been in office. The Prime Minister and the President of the United States have the best of relationships. That's a signal of how well our special relationship is working.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. The Iranian regime hangs gay people from cranes. It funds and arms terror groups and arms Vladimir Putin. A regime like this must never have nuclear weapons. What will the Minister do to prevent them from ever achieving their goals?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman for reminding us of the horrendous human rights record of this regime, a regime that's globally the worst sponsor of state terrorism in the world.
Gregory Campbell.
Can the Foreign Secretary declare from the dispatch box that an Iran with no nuclear weapons is a more likely prospect now as a result of the actions of the Israeli forces and the American forces in the course of the past 10 days?
Well, I recognise the point that the honourable gentleman is making, but let me just be clear to him. Once you have acquired the ability to enrich uranium to 60%, the science doesn't go and that knowledge is there. So ultimately, this will require a diplomatic solution. That's what President Trump is pushing for, and that is what the UK government want to see as well.
And this Slaughter.
Speaker, when the postponed French-Saudi conference on a two-state solution takes place, perhaps as early as next month, does the Minister think this provides the significant opportunity he seeks to recognise Palestine as a state and to do so alongside UK allies?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're talking to the French and the Saudis about their plans. Clearly, events in the Middle East are moving quickly, but I recognise the force of what I...
Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. As a cover for forced marriage, has the government raised the incredibly high rates of first cousin marriage with the Pakistani government, especially when so many of those marriages are between UK nationals and Pakistani nationals?
I was in Pakistan recently, as the honourable gentleman probably knows, and we discussed a range of human rights issues.
Richard Bogan.
Mr. Speaker, the Foreign Secretary will be aware that Colombia and South Africa, as co-chairs of the Hague Group, have called an emergency ministerial conference in defence of international law and the rights of the Palestinian people in July in Bogotá. Countries across the world are confirming their attendance. Will the government be sending a representative to the ministerial conference in Colombia and joining nations of the world standing up for international law?
Foreign Secretary.
The honourable gentleman will recognise that we, alongside our partners right across the global community, continue to raise serious issues about the plight of Palestinians in Gaza, and of course I will look in detail at the conference to which he refers.
Final question, Mark Pritchard.
Guavamia, Japaradze, Kazaradze, Japaridze and Vachadze, all 6 opposition leaders arrested over the last 2 weeks in Georgia. What is the British government going to do about it, and what is the message to the Georgian people from the British government who are suffering this huge democratic backsliding?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Georgian people have made clear their Euro-Atlantic aspirations. We absolutely condemn not only these arrests of opposition politicians, but also the closing down of civil society space. I have communicated my concerns directly to Georgian Dream in recent weeks. We'll be doing so again.
Right, we'll let the front benches clear. Order. I wish to make a short statement about the text of the Universal Credit and Personal Independence Payment Bill. After the bill was published last Wednesday, a small error was spotted in the text as published concerning a cross-reference between subsections in Clause 5. I am satisfied that the error is sufficiently minor to authorise a new corrected print of the bill, which will be available in the Vote Office and online after this statement. The substantive proceedings on the bill are not affected in any way by this change, and no matters of the order arise. We now come to the statement. Pat McFadden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today the Prime Minister attends the opening day of the NATO summit. And that summit is expected to agree a new commitment to grow spending on national security to 5% of GDP by 2035, to be made up by a projected split of 3.5% on core defence spending and 1.5% on broader resilience and security spending. This will mark a new resolve among NATO members to make our country stronger, and, as we've always done before, the United Kingdom will play our part. NATO's member countries meet at a time when the security situation is more in flux than at any time in a generation, a time when Ukraine is in its 4th year of resisting Russia's invasion, a time when we in Europe are being asked to do more to secure our own defences, a time when security can no longer be thought of just as the traditional realms of air, sea and land, but also of technology, of cyber, of the strength of our democratic society. And as we've seen in recent days, it has been a time of renewed military action in the Middle East, with Israel and the United States acting to try to stop Iran developing a nuclear bomb. Now, news of a ceasefire is welcome, but as we've seen even in recent hours, the situation remains fragile, and the focus must now be on a credible plan to stop Iran developing nuclear weapons. Mr. Speaker, it is to the great pride of my party that NATO was founded in the aftermath of the Second World War with the strong support of the post-war Labour government. Ernest Bevin, the Labour Foreign Secretary of the time, said we must face the facts as they are. And today, in this very different age, we too must face the facts as they are. The generation that founded NATO saw it as a powerful expression of collective security and solidarity, alliances abroad matched by capacity at home. And our national security strategy, published today, made for these very different times, is inspired by those same values and those same aims. Every member of this House understands that the first duty of any government is to keep the country safe. That is and always will be our #1 priority. And this national security strategy sets out how we'll do that. The world has changed fundamentally and continues to change before our eyes. This is indeed an age of radical uncertainty. And the leadership challenge in times of such change is to understand, to respond and to explain. The British people understand this. They recognise we are living in a world that is more confrontational, more turbulent and more unpredictable than most of us have experienced in our lifetimes. When the Prime Minister spoke to the House in February, he promised to produce a national security strategy that would match the scale of the task ahead. And the strategy we published today does that, with a plan that is both clear-eyed and hard-edged about the challenges that we face. It sets out a long-term vision for how we will do 3 crucial things. First, protect security at home. And we will do that by defending our territory, controlling our borders, and making the UK a harder target for our enemies, one that is stronger and more resilient to future threats. Secondly, promote strength abroad. This means bolstering our collective security, renewing and refreshing our key alliances, and developing new partnerships in strategic locations across the world. It also means a clear-eyed view of how we engage with major powers like China, where we must protect our national security and promote our economic interests. And my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, will make a further statement on the China audit shortly. And thirdly, increase our sovereign and asymmetric capabilities, rebuilding our defence industries, training our people, focusing investment on our competitive strengths, and using our exceptional research and innovation base to build up advantages in new frontier technologies. All of this will make us a stronger and more resilient country. But delivering on each of these commitments will only be possible if all parts of society are pulling in the same direction. Our manufacturing, science and technology industries have to be aligned with national security objectives. Our industrial strategy, published yesterday, will help play to the UK's strengths and deepen our capabilities. And the investments that we announced in the spending review also deepen our resilience and strength as a country. A health service strong enough to cope, safe and secure energy supplies, modern housing and transport for our people, all of these contribute to a strong, united kingdom. That is why it is so important that all parts of government and businesses big and small understand that cybersecurity is national security, that our core systems and the revenues of business are being targeted by our adversaries, and why we as legislators have to ensure that our own laws, from borders to trade, fit with national security. This will take a whole system approach that reflects today's reality. National security means strong supply chains, controls on immigration, tackling online harm, energy security, economic security, border security. It transcends both foreign and domestic policy, and it all plays a role in how we make Britain a safer, more secure and more sovereign nation. And the document provides the blueprint of how this fits together. The strategy brings together everything we are doing across the full spectrum of national security. The commitment to spend that 5% of our domestic economic output on national security by 2035, meeting our NATO commitments once again. Over £1 billion we are investing in a new network of national biosecurity centres, how we are stepping up in areas like cyber capability, our anti-corruption strategy to counter illicit finance and corruption, the expansion of our legal and law enforcement toolkit, the largest sustained investment in our armed forces since the Cold War, our plan to unlock real benefits for working people from this defence investment, how we will prioritise NATO explicitly in our defence planning, a vision not only for deepening our alliances with the United States and with the European Union, but also for growing our relationships with other emerging nations. The money we are investing into our brilliant research and development base over the coming years, such as the £750 million to be invested in the supercomputer at Edinburgh University, our ambition to gain a competitive advantage in cutting-edge technologies and to embed national security in our agenda for artificial intelligence. We don't underestimate the size of this task. The world is a more dangerous place than at any time since the end of the Cold War. Yet it is also a place where Britain's values, capabilities and alliances can make a positive difference. Since we came to power, we have taken step after step to prepare Britain for what lies ahead. Record investment in defence, backing our allies, resisting the false choices put before us, which would only have weakened and diminished our country. Today's strategy represents an important contribution to all that work. It recognises that our long-term growth, prosperity and living standards all depend on national security becoming a way of life for people and businesses in the UK. This is a plan for how we protect the British people. It's a plan for today's times, but rooted in long-held values. A plan to defend our national interests, deepen our international alliances, and increase our sovereign capabilities. And, Mr. Speaker, I commend it to the House.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster for advance sight of the statement and also the strategy. Protecting our country from internal and external threats to keep the British people and our interests safe is the #1 priority for any government. And as a former Home Secretary, I have seen at first hand the incredible efforts that our security and intelligence services do to keep us safe. So much of their work will never be disclosed, but I know that the whole House will join me in thanking them for all they do, alongside our police, counter-terrorism operations, armed forces and all those who work so hard to keep Britain safe. Mr. Speaker, His Majesty's opposition will always work constructively with the government in the national interest, especially in the current global climate where threats are increasingly complex and multifaceted. Iran, China, Russia, North Korea, non-state terrorist actors and transnational criminals all pose a significant threat to us all. That's why we will welcome the actions that build on the measures that we put in place in government, including our National Security Act in 2023, which gives us increased oversight on adversarial action and introduced the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the statement and strategy refers to 3 pillars on security at home, strength abroad, and increasing sovereign and asymmetric capabilities. Taking each in turn, on security at home, protecting critical national infrastructure must be a key component to any national security strategy. Can the Chancellor give more details on how this will work in practice and the resources that will be provided? Can he also say what further steps are being taken to protect people on British soil from transnational repression? With China placing bounties on the heads of people in our own country, and both the NSS and the SDR highlighting the threats posed by China, will he inform, and can he confirm, if China will be placed on the enhanced tier of FIRS? And will the government drop its support for the China Super Embassy Spy Hub? On projecting our strength abroad, the Chancellor has mentioned the NATO summit today and the commitment to increase what he calls national security spending to 5% of GDP by 2035, with 3.5% on core defence. But he doesn't have a plan to get to 3%, let alone the 3.5%. It is all smoke and mirrors. So when will he actually deliver a plan to get to 3%? And why won't he heed our calls to hit 3% by the end of this Parliament, which would be vital and a vital stepping stone on the way to that higher defence spending that he is seeking? And will the government give clear information on exactly what spending will be included in the 1.5% target? Is it any new money? And can I ask, Mr. Deputy Speaker, does this, for example, include the costs of Sizewell, which we have heard about recently? As well as increasing spending, we need to develop a tougher edge for a dangerous world. Given the security threats that we continue to face, will Labour's £30 billion Chagos Surrender Treaty be scrapped, as it undermines our national security? And contrary to the Prime Minister's claim, our loss of sovereignty has been publicly backed by representatives of the regime in China, Russia and Iran. The cost also hoovers up money that we could spend on much-needed defence capabilities at this incredibly dangerous time. On increasing sovereign and asymmetric capabilities, can the Chancellor explain what support will be given to private enterprise and investment to support efforts in this area? I would also note here that the government's words in this strategy do not quite align with the broader action that the government has been taking. For example, the decision to allow the Chinese firm Mingyang to provide wind turbines for large wind farm projects in the UK. Does the Chancellor acknowledge the need to protect our energy infrastructure from such potential malign activity? And if so, what concrete steps have been taken to increase that very resilience to our own infrastructure? Finally, on the important role of the Joint Committee on National Security Strategy and Parliamentary oversight, we understand that the National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, has not been made available to the committee for questioning. The government has claimed that this would not be appropriate for him as a special advisor to answer questions from the committee. But in this particular case, it is more than clear that Mr. Powell's role as a National Security Advisor puts him in a unique position, a unique senior position, and it would appear that as the lead advisor for the government's national security strategy, it's the only right body for that joint committee to have the ability to put questions to him. So given the important issue here and Mr. Powell's senior role and central position, will the government now allow Mr. Powell to finally give evidence to the committee to allow it to undertake its important work? Mr. Deputy Speaker, we will always work to support the defence and security of Britain and engage constructively with ministers and challenge them to do everything possible to keep us safe. So I welcome the chance for these questions to be answered today.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Let me express my gratitude to the Shadow Foreign Secretary for her response and the spirit in which she put her questions and her welcome for at least broad parts of the strategy that we've published today. Let me turn to the questions that she's asked and try to address them. In terms of the resources to protect people, we made our commitment to increase defence expenditure to 2.5% of GDP, and I have to say that unlike the party opposite, we said exactly how we would pay for it, even though it meant a very difficult choice on this side of the House. On the first scheme, she will be aware that Iran and Russia have been placed on the enhanced tier, and when she asks about our approach to China, this is a serious question, and we have to have a serious approach to it. Now, the party opposite, during their time in government, veered between the naivety of the so-called golden years, in effect, no engagement at all. We believe that both of these were the wrong approach. Instead, our approach will be marked by a desire to protect our national security and promote our economic interests. Total disengagement is not a good option for the UK, so we will be guided by both of these things, and the Foreign Secretary, as I said, will make a fuller statement on China shortly. She asks what kind of things might be included in the 1.5%. That would include things like cybersecurity, border security, telecoms infrastructure, and for those who say, what have those things got to do with defence? Be clear about this. Our opponents and our enemies know that these things are part of national security, and we should recognise that too. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I'll have to say we have resisted the opposition's pleas for us to choose between our allies, and in resisting that, I believe we have a strategy here that makes our country stronger and enhances Britain's capabilities, and that is at the heart of the strategy that we put today. And indeed, we made a conscious choice to increase investment in the country's future capabilities at the spending review. This will give us increased strength in the future, and the spending we've committed to is funded, is set out in the spending review, and that's the approach that we'll take in the future too.
For the Chairman of the National Security Committee, Matt West.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and can I thank my right honourable friend for this statement. I totally agree that defence and security has to begin at home, in the home and in the workplace. So this is a very welcome, comprehensive national security strategy, given its wide-ranging assessment of all the threats we face, whether it be defence, security, critical national infrastructure, and so on. There are an impressive number of work streams that have fed into this, whether it be AUKUS, whether it be the SDR, the Resilience Review, and so on. But I noticed that there was no mention of the National Security Council. So can he tell me what he's doing to ensure that there is strategic coherence across this strategy, and that it will herald a cultural change in this country in how it faces security?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Chairman of the Joint Committee for his question. I should have said in response to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, I hope to reach a resolution with the committee soon on the matter of appearances before the committee, and I'm always happy to appear before the committee if invited. The Chairman of the committee is quite right to say to the House that publishing strategies is one thing, there has to be follow-through on them. The difference between this and some other documents produced is it is a whole system approach, looking at sovereign capability, looking at international alliances, and looking at making our country a harder target for our enemies. All three of those have to be brought together and followed through in a systematic way.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Liberal Democrats welcome the publication today of the Government's National Security Strategy, because we recognise we are living in a world that is less stable and more insecure now than at any time since the end of the Cold War. Putin's forces continue to wage their war in Ukraine, the Middle East is teetering on the precipice of a fully fledged regional war, and the actions of the United States under an unreliable President Trump are putting an enormous strain upon the post-war settlement which we have benefited from so much. And the nature of the threats that we face continues to evolve, something which has become immensely clear to millions of people across the country with the recent cyber attacks on M&S and the Co-op. And we've seen in other countries attempts by authoritarian states to meddle in free and fair elections. And that's why we welcome so much of what is contained in this strategy. It's also why the Liberal Democrats have welcomed the government's decision to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, although we've urged ministers to go further. But given the new NATO target of 5% of GDP, will the government now urgently convene cross-party talks to establish a consensus on how to get there? We need to show our adversaries that we are serious about this commitment. And the strategy also has a welcome focus on resilience, something especially important given not just the scale of the threat that we face, but its varied nature. So will the Minister look at steps taken by our allies, such as Estonia, to inform their populations about how to deal with these threats should they arise? Will the Minister reflect the threat posed to our democracy by hostile actors by making protecting our democracy and national security priority? I also note the importance which this review places on sovereign, independent capabilities. Now, is this an admission from the government that under President Trump, the United States is no longer a reliable ally? And will this assessment be carried over into defence procurement, where we look to maintain an inextricably close bond with the United States? Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Honourable Lady for her comments. Let me try to go through some of the issues that she raised. She's absolutely right to draw attention to the importance of the recent cyber attacks on Marks and Spencer's, the Co-op, the legal aid system. This shows what both state and non-state actors can do, and it shows how important it is that we strengthen our cyber capabilities and our cyber defences as much as possible. In terms of being serious, the actions we have taken so far since the election show that we are serious about this. We have got a plan in place to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP this Parliament. It took a very difficult decision to do it, but at the spending review we showed exactly how that was going to be paid for. In terms of her reference to the United States remains a strong, reliable, deep and important ally for the United Kingdom, and the relationship between us helps to protect the British people every day.
Dame Emily Thornberry.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. In the absence of a published China audit that we've all been looking forward to so much, the national security strategy has been gone through with a fine-tooth comb by many of us. In relation to China, it says this: instances of China's espionage, interference in our democracy and undermining of our economic security have increased over recent years. I wondered whether we would be able to get some guidance as to how we were going to therefore address that, because that is not entirely clear. And in particular, advice that's being given to the nations and regions when they are dealing with our third biggest trading partner, with whom we need to promote, but we also need to protect ourselves.
Can I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for her question? And it is very good. If people want to look at page 39 of the document, they will see many references to China, and I referred to the statement the Foreign Secretary is going to make. In terms of our advice to people, as I said, it is guided by the protection of our security interests and the promotion of our economic interests, and she refers specifically to the devolved governments and the nations and regions. And we did arrange a recent security briefing for the First Ministers at the time of the recent meeting of the Council of Nations and Regions, because we agree that it is important to bring them into our thinking and help them play their role in protecting our national security interests too.
Sir Jeremy Wright.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Right Honourable Gentleman's long experience will tell him that sometimes in government, the grander the language, the less significant the actual announcement. But if on this occasion, and I'm perfectly prepared to accept that this is so, the government is making a serious effort to redraw the boundaries of what is national security policy and what is not, does he agree that we need matching parliamentary scrutiny of that area of policy? And as he knows, the Intelligence and Security Committee is the only committee with the necessary clearances to look at classified material. Does he think this is a good moment to look again at the Memorandum of Understanding between the committee and the government about what the committee covers?
Mr Deputy Speaker, he is right to say that the document is distinguished by a broader view of national security. That is also reflected in the discussion at NATO today, where we are looking beyond the core defence expenditure on our armed forces to those other things that we've discussed which contribute to our national security. In terms of the Intelligence and Security Committee, can I thank the committee for its work in all its iterations over the years. I have a good dialogue with the committee, and I look forward to that continuing and for the committee to play the very important role that it does.
Blair McDougall. Not here. Alex Ballinger.
And I welcome the Minister's focus on building up our armed forces in this more uncertain world. But is it not also vital that we focus on preventing conflict for our national security? Bringing sides together to negotiate and mediate can reduce conflict from spilling over and allow our armed forces to focus on the serious threats that he's identified in the National Security Strategy. And it is for this reason that former military chiefs, heads of the security service and select committee chairs last week wrote a letter to the PM calling for investment in peace building and conflict prevention. Will the Minister commit to using all tools in our kit bag, including peace building and conflict prevention, to keep our citizens safe?
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He is quite right to draw attention to the deep expertise that exists in the diplomatic service that advances our national interests in a whole range of ways every day, including in conflict resolution. And I pay tribute to the work of our diplomatic posts and diplomatic service right across the world.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. If you'll allow me, I'm going to read a small quote from page 10. We will continue to abide by the important principle shared by NATO and its key partners that the security of the Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific regions are inextricably linked. Mr Deputy Speaker, that's not how the US views it. The current Trump administration sees them as quite separate and would prefer if the United Kingdom focused its efforts on the Euro-Atlantic. How would he explain this discrepancy?
Mr Deputy Speaker, they are inextricably linked, and while the Prime Minister attends the NATO summit today, our carrier group is in the Indo-Pacific region, and so it is quite right that the strategy that we published today draws attention to our responsibilities, our ambition and our determination to act in both arenas.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome this national security statement. Defence begins at home, and my community play a role in the UK's security and resilience with the HQ of Standing Joint Command in Aldershot. We need to focus as much on national resilience as conventional military threats. Can the Minister share the work that he's been doing on the National Resilience Strategy? How does this fit with the National Security Strategy that is in front of us today?
Mr Deputy Speaker, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. She's right that resilience and target hardening is got to be part of our national security strategy. Resilience is about capability, it's about investment. We are determined to do both, and we'll have more to say about resilience in the coming weeks.
Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr Deputy Speaker, before the last election, the Intelligence and Security Committee produced a very comprehensive report on China, making it very clear they consider China to be one of our greatest threats. And in this today, I'm astonished that in the whole report there are 3 paragraphs that deal with China, and it raises 1 or 2 issues and then proceeds to take a different decision. It talks about it being a problem with human rights, which is genocide, cybersecurity attacks on the UK, China's espionage, interference in our democracy, sanctioning people like myself, undermining our economic security, and guilty of transnational repression. It also ships arms to Myanmar, keeping that regime brutally in charge, and at the same time is building the largest navy. To what degree do 3 paragraphs satisfy the idea that surely China should be in the list of threats?
Mr Deputy Speaker, I thank the Right Honourable Member for his question. Let me make clear that any sanctions on UK parliamentarians are wrong, and there is no place for them. The paragraphs he referred to set out some of the position on China, but as I've said, the Foreign Secretary will make a broader statement on the China audit immediately after this statement. I would repeat again what I said in my opening remarks, that our approach to China will be guided by protecting our security interests, which we'll always do robustly, but also promoting our economic interests, and we do have an economic relationship with the second biggest economy in the world.
Chris Vance.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster for his statement here today. Another firm example this government puts keeping its residents safe as its top priority. However, can I once again gently raise the importance of health security? As we know, there is a changing nature in warfare, and once again lobby for Harlow to be the new home of the UK Health Security Agency.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I believe that the honourable member is due happy birthday wishes, so let me take that opportunity and let me thank him for his tireless campaigning for the laboratories at Harlow. This is an important capability for the United Kingdom. There has been a decision awaiting for some years. I'm not ready to announce it today, but people will not have too long to wait before that's announced.
Edwin Morello.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the National Security Strategy document outlines an expanded meaning of national security to include areas such as food security. If food security is national security, and I certainly agree it is, then we need to increase domestic production, not cut supply support for farmers, and not increase our reliance on overseas imports from the other side of the world. Can the Chancellor outline how the National Security Strategy will be used to change DEFRA policy?
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, we do agree that food security is important. Our farmers, food producers, food retailers have been burdened with far too much increased costs and delays in recent years, and the recent agreement that we reached with the European Union will lift that burden through the SPS agreement that we've reached. That will be good news for food producers in the UK, who will be able to sell and grow their magnificent products with much greater ease than has been the case in recent years.
Joanna Baxter.
Mr Deputy Speaker, it's vital that the UK has robust defences against biological incidents, accidents and attacks. So can my right honourable friend tell the House what steps the government is taking to invest in our biosecurity and how this will help protect our country from the range of bio-threats that we face?
I thank my honourable friend for her question. There's a £1 billion investment into biosecurity, and my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for DEFRA, has been able to announce new investment in critical resources at Weybridge as part of that only today.
Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. May I welcome the National Security Strategy which has been published today. It bears a remarkable resemblance to every single one that I've seen over the last 15 years, with only very slight adjustments over that period. I wonder whether there's any connection between the author or whether it's just that the officials haven't changed, so the politics hasn't changed. May I, however, raise the fact that the one thing that really has changed is technology. And the document that I've seen this morning bears very little connection to the democratization of technology that we've seen in the warfare from Ukraine, in Russia, or indeed Israel and Iran, or indeed the future warfare that may be waged against us by the switching off of electronic items, including solar panels and cars, by the Chinese state.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I have great respect for the right honourable gentleman, and I thank him for his question. He's absolutely right to draw attention to the importance of technology. I mentioned it in my opening remarks. That's why we have put such stress on having an AI action plan to make this country as strong as possible in this field. That's why we made the investment in the supercomputer at Edinburgh, and this time put the money behind it. This is a critical part of our strength as a country. It is one where we have significant advantage and expertise, and one aspect of the document is to make sure that where we do have an advantage, we invest in it and we make sure it deepens our capability in these crucial ways.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. In Edinburgh South West I have Dreghorn and Redford Barracks, so I can only welcome the biggest uplift in defence spending since the Cold War. But many people will be concerned about the costs, so I do wonder if there's an opportunity here as well. If our NATO allies are increasing spending along with us, Is there an opportunity for our defence sector to benefit from that, generating jobs and also helping grow our economy?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. When we make the decision to increase defence expenditure, this shouldn't just be seen as direct spending on the armed forces. This is also about the supply chain, about industrial capability, about defence suppliers, and critically about the skills needed to meet our defence needs. And in that, that is why the Prime Minister has referred to a defence dividend. This is not just security policy, it's industrial policy and skills policy too.
Robin Swan. Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Cyber security is core and central to our security at home, but a significant weakness is the security of the cabling in the North Atlantic and along the west coast of Ireland, where for too long the Irish Government has freeloaded and taken for granted the United Kingdom providing defence and security. Can I ask the Chancellor, has the Government approached the Irish Government to see if they will play or pay their part?
I thank the honourable member for his question, and I recently had the privilege of visiting the Cyber Centre at Queen's University in Belfast, where they are doing fantastic work in research in this area. He's also right to draw attention to the importance of subsea cables. These carry critical data between us and overseas countries every day, and it is certainly part of our strategy to do everything that we can to protect our subsea cable infrastructure.
Jessica Toll.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Unlike the honourable member opposite, I'd like to welcome the focus on science and technology in the National Security Strategy. With a new innovation quarter being developed in Talbot Village and a local council with an aspiration to be an AI growth zone, can the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster tell me how this strategy will support growth and security in my Bournemouth West constituency and across the southwest of England?
My honourable friend is absolutely right to draw attention to the importance of technology. I said in my opening remarks that the investments that we made in the spending review, which did not fall from the sky but come about because of choices made by the government, contribute to the strength and resilience of the country. And that is why the strategy talks of three pillars: of homeland security, of alliances abroad, and of deepening our sovereign capabilities. All three are important.
Neil Shastri-Hurst.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Given the scale of foreign influence operations, particularly those of China, does the Minister accept that Britain's societal resilience remains far too limited? Without clear government messaging, how can institutions or the public properly play their role? And will the Minister commit to expanding the Defence of Democracy Task Force to include public education, support for free media, and curbing PLA-linked speakers at taxpayer-funded events?
I thank him for his question. I would say my faith in British society was strong. It is a strong society, it has deeply held democratic values. We never take those for granted, but it has been enduring and strong over the years. He is right to draw attention to the importance of defending our democracy. We will always defend the right to have free elections. We'll always defend the right of our elected representatives to go about their business, and we will do our best to promote free speech and debate in our democratic process.
Speaker, the Minister will know from my background that I will welcome the defence measures contained in the National Security Strategy, but I particularly want to highlight the passages on energy security. We know when the war in Ukraine, the impacts of that, combined with our historic over-reliance on a single source of fuel, fossil fuels, meant that many people in my constituency of North East Derbyshire and across this country faced crippling energy bills. Can the Minister outline, therefore, how this security strategy will improve our energy security and make sure that we never face this situation again?
My honourable friend is absolutely right to draw attention to the experience we had several years ago in the early stages of the Ukraine war, which showed the perils of over-reliance on overseas oil and gas. And that is why investment in clean, homegrown energy is also an investment in our national security, and why it contributes directly to the broader view of national security that's outlined in the strategy that we published today.
Christine Jardine.
Very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. As MP for Edinburgh West, of course, I welcome
the government's continued commitment to defence industries in which so many of my constituents work in the city. But as the Liberal Democrat Scotland spokesperson, I also welcome what the Minister himself described as a critical investment in Edinburgh University in the supercomputer. So can you tell us, please, will there be discussions with the Scottish Government to ensure that not just the national security implications of this, but the educational and economic growth opportunities are achieved for the whole country and that the whole country benefits?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I think the Honourable Lady said she was standing with two hats, and let me tell her I know how that feels. She is absolutely right to draw attention to the importance of dialogue with the Scottish Government. The Chair of the Select Committee referred to the First Minister's earlier in her question. Yes, we do have, I think, a positive dialogue. Of course, there are political differences, but I think the dialogue is in probably a better place than it's been for some time. And as a former graduate of Edinburgh University, I very much welcome the investment in the supercomputer there.
Rinder Singh Judd.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I welcome this statement and particularly welcome the intent to renew and refresh our key alliances and develop new partnerships in strategic locations across the world. Clearly, the United States remains our most important defence and security ally, but we also have historic relationships with countries like India, where we've also recently agreed a very successful trade deal. In addition, the Royal Navy's UK Carrier Strike Group arrived in Singapore, I think yesterday, on a visit. So in view of these relationships, can the Chancellor outline how the Government is strengthening our defence security relationships with key allies like India and Singapore in strategically important location of the Indo-Pacific? Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's right that the Carrier Group is in Singapore, and he's also right to draw attention to the very important India trade deal that was reached by the government just a few weeks ago. In recent months, we have reached trade agreements with the United States, with the European Union and with India. Many people thought that couldn't be done over a course of years. It is something that was done over a course of weeks, and each one of those agreements will help to strengthen our economy and deepen our alliances with key allies.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I note what the Minister said about social resilience. There's little point in strategising to defend our security and power in the world if we surrender our freedoms and culture without a whimper at home. So what, for example, will the government do to stop the misuse of sections 4 and 5 of the Public Order Act, not to mention the decisions of the likes of Bristol University and the government with its proposed Islamophobia definition to create a de facto Islamic blasphemy law in Britain?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the Honourable Gentleman should have more faith in the depth and strength of British society. This is a society that has sustained robust debate over the years. I think it can do so in the future. It is a critical part of our national strength. It is part of what makes this country great. And I pay tribute to British society for being so strong and allowing such robust debate.
Conor Rand.
Madam Deputy Speaker, does the Minister agree with me that our energy security is fundamental to our national security? And therefore, does he share my concerns that the party opposite now appear to disagree and oppose with the investment we are making in energy security in this country? And that if they disagree with the investment we're making in nuclear, in small modular reactors and Great British Energy, they should stand up and say so?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. When we make the decision to invest in new nuclear power, that is a contribution to our energy security. When we make the investment in other homegrown clean energy, that is a contribution to our national security. It is essential that in this day and age we have a broad view of national security which understands our vulnerabilities and understands the importance of protecting ourselves against them.
Joshua Reynolds.
Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman mentioned new technologies such as AI and the expansion of our legal toolkit, but very little about the legal safeguards and domestic checks and balances that are needed. So could the Chancellor reassure me what checks and balances will be included to ensure civil liberties of UK citizens are protected at all costs?
Of course we'll protect civil liberties, and there's a live debate about both security and opportunity in AI. They are both part of our strategy, but let us be clear, we are on the threshold of something with enormous possibilities and something in which the UK has significant and deep strengths. And what the strategy we published today says that we should deepen our capabilities in these areas to grow our sovereign capabilities, and that in turn will make us stronger as a country, and that's what we intend to do.
Adam Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Rolls-Royce Submarines in Derby, just outside of my constituency, Erewash, is a major employer of my constituents. Will the Chancellor confirm that the Government remains committed to the nuclear triple lock and comment on how today's announcement will support our nuclear manufacturing industry in the East Midlands?
Well, let me pay tribute to the work of Rolls-Royce, the contribution that they make to our national security, and let me assure him that the commitment to the nuclear deterrent as a cornerstone of our national security is right there in the document and right there as part of our national security strategy.
David Reid.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Labour has repeatedly stated that food security is national security, a point that I and many of my constituents wholeheartedly agree with. Yet there remains a clear disconnect between that rhetoric and the substance of current policy. Beyond the announced biosecurity measures, does the Chancellor genuinely believe that the national security strategy goes far enough to address the resilience of domestic food supply chains, the risk posed by climate change to agriculture, and the systemic vulnerabilities in our food systems?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I said a few moments ago, the actions taken by this government have lifted the cost and delay and bureaucracy burdens on our food producers by reaching an SPS veterinary agreement with the European Union that the party opposite would never have reached because of their ideological objection to doing so. That is good for our farmers and food producers and something that this government has done.
Jim Allister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In this strategy, I read a number of encouraging promises. I quote two of them. Controlling our borders, controls on immigration. Applying those two promises, how will that work out at the open border with the Republic of Ireland, which allows unfettered immigrant passage into the United Kingdom? If we're going to control our borders, if we're going to control immigration, when are we going to start controlling that border?
Well, the honourable gentleman will be aware that there's been a common travel area between Ireland and the United Kingdom for many years. That is something that the last government and us were determined to keep. That's why there is an open border between the two, as he says. And I also refer him to the immigration white paper published just a few weeks ago, which set out reforms to the legal immigration system. It makes an immense contribution to UK society, but we also know that people want a proper set of rules around it, and that's what the immigration white paper provides.
Cameron Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I echo the comments made by the Right Honourable Member for Chingford and Woodford Green about the Chinese Communist Party. The National Security Strategy recognises that UK security is tied to that of our allies. Does the government acknowledge that lasting peace in Europe means terminating Putin's European ambitions in Ukraine? And if so, how will the government get this through to the US administration?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, we have stood by Ukraine. The strategy sets out the degree of support that this country has given Ukraine over the past 4 years. We continue to stand by Ukraine. And we continue to support that country's right to decide its own future. And that will remain a core part of our strategy. And with regard to China, my honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, will be making a statement shortly setting out the China audit in greater detail.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank my honourable friend for Northampton and asking the question which I had hoped to ask, but he asked it, and the Minister sort of answered it, I think, maybe perhaps. But if I can ask a separate question, if you don't mind, please. If ambition is to reach 5% by 2035, is both defence and broader security, what is the true current figure? We know defence, but not wider security. For instance, will it include MI5, MI6, GCHQ, counter-terrorism, or indeed all of the police forces across this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland? Thank you so much.
Can I thank the honourable member for his question? And he asks, taking these two parts, what is the situation now? As a statement released overnight said, by 2027, under the current definitions of what we spend on core defence expenditure and broader security expenditure, it would be 4.1% under these definitions by 2027, and we hope to grow from there.
And that concludes the statement. We'll now move on to the next statement, and I'll give a few moments for the front benches to swap over and the House to settle. Statement, Foreign Secretary.
Well, with permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will make a statement on the China audit. China's rise has shaped the geopolitical landscape. Over the past decade, their military expenditure doubled. Their armed forces became the world's largest. They established dominance over critical mineral supply chains. They pursued relentless innovation in electric vehicles, AI, and even space travel. And over the same period, China has delivered a third of global economic growth, becoming the world's second largest economy, and together with Hong Kong, the UK's third largest trading partner. Madam Deputy Speaker, not engaging with China is therefore no choice at all. China's power is an inescapable fact. After what the Intelligence and Security Committee in 2023 described as a completely inadequate approach over the past decade to dealing with China's size, ambition and capability, we must now look at the facts. Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton attempted a golden era. Boris Johnson let Huawei into our critical national infrastructure before U-turning. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak decided that China was a threat, but failed to devise any policy response, instead burying their heads in the sand. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government conducted an audit of our most complex bilateral relationship to deliver a long-term strategy, moving beyond cheap rhetoric to a data-driven cross-government approach. And I'd like to thank the hundreds who contributed, honourable members of course, experts, businesses, diaspora communities, devolved governments and close allies. Madam Deputy Speaker, the audit is less a single act than an ongoing exercise, which will continue to guide the UK's approach to China. It informed the government's strategic defence review, which assessed China was a sophisticated and persistent challenge. It informed the national security strategy published today, which sets out China's impacts on each strategic pillar of our UK national security. And it has steered our trade and industrial strategies, which analyse where greater engagement is possible, given the important role China can play in delivering UK growth. Madam Deputy Speaker, honourable members will understand that much of the audit was conducted at a high classification, and most of the detail is not disclosable without damaging our national interests. I'm therefore providing a broad summary of its recommendations today in a manner consistent with our Five Eyes partners. Madam Deputy Speaker, on security, the audit described a full spectrum of threats, from espionage and cyber attacks to the repression of Hong Kongers and attacks on the rules-based order. It made clear that our protections must extend more widely than they currently do, from the security of this House to our critical national infrastructure. Honourable members will again recognise that disclosing the detail of these responses would undermine their effectiveness. But I can confirm that following the audit, we are investing £600 million in our intelligence services. We are updating our state threats legislation following John Hall's review. We are strengthening our response to transnational repression. We're introducing training for police and launching more online guidance to support victims. We're launching, as announced in the industrial strategy, a 12-week consultation on updating the definitions covering the 17 sensitive areas under the National Security and Investment Act, and we're working bilaterally with China to enhance intelligence flows related to illicit finance, specifically organised immigration crime and scam centres, using National Crime Agency capabilities. Madam Deputy Speaker, on global security, the audit underlined the extent of Beijing's support for the Kremlin. The government has already tripled the number of Chinese entities sanctioned for equipping Russia's illegal war, and we will continue to confront that. The audit reiterated that our approach to China must stay rooted both in international law and deterrence. We will continue to confront China's dangerous and destabilising activity in the South China Sea, which I saw for myself when I visited the Philippines. And we will continue to work with our regional partners to support freedom of navigation and call out China's abuses. We will double down on AUKUS. We will not challenge our long-standing position on Taiwan while sustaining unofficial but vibrant ties with Taiwan on trade, on education and innovation. We will also never shy away from shining a spotlight on human rights, notably the situations in Xinjiang and Tibet, while on Hong Kong we will insist that China honours its commitments under the Sino-British Joint Declaration, including by repealing the national security law and releasing Jimmy Lai. Madam Deputy Speaker, the audit made clear that our approach will always be guided by the UK's long-term economic growth priorities. It provided ample evidence of the extent to which our economies are intertwined. China is our third biggest trading partner, our universities' second largest source of international students. China will continue to play a vital role in supporting the UK's secure growth. But over the past decade, we have not had the structures either to take the opportunities or protect us from the risks which those deep leaks demand. Businesses told us time and again that they have lacked senior political engagement, lacked adequate government guidance, and we have already begun to develop new structures. Regular economic and financial dialogues with my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, setting us on course to unlock $1 billion of economic value for the UK economy, and positioning the UK's world-leading financial sector to reflect China's importance to the global economy. Joint Economic and Trade Commissions and Joint Commission meetings on science. We will also launch a new online hub bringing together detailed and specific business advice. And forthcoming trade strategy will set out how we will support British firms to enhance links with China's vast and growing consumer market, as well as assess new tools to keep goods made by forced labour anywhere in the world off Britain's high street. Madam Deputy Speaker, the audit recognised that China's global role does not fit into simple stereotypes. China is the world's biggest emitter, but also the biggest producer of renewables. It offers $80 billion towards development annually. And China is the UK's second largest research collaborator. 11% of British research output included Chinese authors. So the audit was clear. The UK must develop new dialogues with China on issues like climate, development, global health and science, as well as on trade. And in doing so, we're driving our long-term interests in creating secure opportunities for UK PLC. Madam Deputy Speaker, we cannot deal with China's complexity unless we improve our capability to understand it for our national security and for secure trade and growth. The audit showed that under the last government, there was a profound lack of confidence in how to deal with China, and a profound lack of knowledge regarding China's culture, its history, and most importantly, its language. Madam Deputy Speaker, over the past year, I have found that far few Mandarins speak Mandarin. We are already taking action to address this, introducing a new China fast stream in the FCDO, creating an FCDO global China network, training over 1,000 civil servants on China policy in the past year. Enhancing these capabilities still further will be a core focus for the £209 million of FCDO Transformation Fund, announced in the National Security Strategy by my honourable friend a short time ago. The new strategy, which proceeds from this audit, will ensure that the government examines the full spectrum of interests in its decision-making processes and delivers the consistent approach which was so sorely lacking. Madam Deputy Speaker, anyone expecting a simple prescription on China is not living in the real world. The audit has painted a complex picture, but it has provided us with a clear way forward. The UK's approach to China will be founded on progressive realism, taking the world as it is, not as we would wish it to be. Like our closest allies, we will cooperate where we can, and we will challenge where we must. Never compromising on our national security, recognising the complexity of the world as it is, engaging confidently, carefully and pragmatically, delivering secure growth. These are the hallmarks of grown-up government, acting in the long-term national interest. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Foreign Secretary Dame Priti Patel.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to the Foreign Secretary for advance sight of a statement, and I look forward to reading the audit and also receiving the detailed briefings that clearly are not able to be put in the public domain. Let's be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker. China thinks its way is the best way and the only way. Its leaders are on a quest, an international quest for global governance and for their frightening authoritarian model to supersede ours. Ours is one of democracy, openness and standing up for freedom and values. Madam Deputy Speaker, China has been ramping up its military with alarming conviction, including conventional, nuclear and space capabilities. It is a critical enabler of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. And we saw President Xi standing side by side with Putin in Moscow just weeks ago. So be in no doubt, China and Russia are collaborating across all domains to underestimate our very democratic freedoms and the West. Beijing tramples on the Sino-British Declaration in Hong Kong, threatens BNOs on British soil and has imprisoned Jimmy Lai, a British national, through this awful politically motivated trial. Beijing's unjustified aggression in the South China Sea is dangerous, and it unacceptably intimidates and challenges the sovereignty of its neighbours in the Indo-Pacific. It is consistently and constantly threatening the peace-seeking democracy of Taiwan while committing the most appalling human rights abuses in Xinjiang. And it applies hybrid and grey zone techniques against Britain, including malign cyber activity directed at our democratic institutions and sanctioning our own very members of Parliament, all while exploiting vulnerable countries through its Belt and Road Initiative. China also flagrantly brushes aside economic rules, steals intellectual property, and has developed sophisticated models to acquire strategic assets around the world. Despite all of this, Madam Deputy Speaker, it has taken the government a year to produce this audit, which seemingly fails to set out any kind of serious strategic framework. And I think it's fair to say we know why. Because the government, and in fact the Foreign Secretary has touched on this, has gone cap in hand to China to bail out its terrible handling of the British economy. It is setting up its closer ties, economic ties with China, while knowing very well that British businesses here are struggling, not just when it comes to competing against China, but actually struggling to absorb the weight of Labour's own regulatory costs in this country. Yeah. So, can I ask the Foreign Secretary, and so far we've not seen it in this statement, whether or not he can name a single area where a measurable, tangible progress has been made in advancing critical British interests with China, whether it's on national security, economic practices, on climate, or on human rights. He did fail to mention the fact that members of this House have been sanctioned by China. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we have seen signs of naivety from the government consistently, if I may say so. Within a day of the Prime Minister meeting with President Xi, Within one day of the Prime Minister meeting President Xi, he effectively held this as an opportunity to bring about a strong and consistent relationship, whereas surprises would be avoided. And within the next few days, 45 pro-democracy campaigners were jailed in Hong Kong, following a very harsh application of the draconian national security law. That's completely unacceptable. What is the Foreign Secretary's actual strategy to deter China from systematically extinguishing freedoms from Hong Kong? And will he commit to using the full weight of the government machine to do more to protect BNOs and Hong Kongers suffering what is an outrageous transnational repression in the UK, rather than, if I may say so, just issuing guidance and training? The government has constantly and suspiciously backed the application for this new China super embassy in London. Why is the Foreign Secretary and the government not showing the same backbone that the Irish counterparts and Australian counterparts have shown when they saw fit to block embassy planning applications from Russia that they deemed too risky for national security? Does the government have a practical strategy to deter Chinese efforts to capture Taiwan by military means or by stealth, or opposing the human rights abuses in Xinjiang? What is the Foreign Secretary's end goal, and what are the means of getting there? What will the Foreign Secretary do to find new critical mineral supply chains to reduce reliance on Chinese trade? And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, what will the government do now to move Jimmy Lai's case onto an urgent footing, away from this complex consular case handling that it seems to have in the Foreign Office? Madam Deputy Speaker, the government also needs to urgently sort out some of the grave contradictions that have been mentioned in this statement, if I just may highlight a few. We've already seen in the Foreign Secretary's statement today, he speaks about the China audit underlining the extent of Beijing's support of the Kremlin. We don't question that and doubt that, but some action is needed. The statement also says that they're reiterating the approach that China must stay rooted both in international law and deterrence. How is that helping Jimmy Lai at this particular moment? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do just want to say that we will always support the security and the defence of our country, so the government must do much more when it comes up to keeping Britain safe from China.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have to say, I know that the Right Honourable Lady can be pretty brazen, but a lecture from her about China policy should make even her blush. Her party oversaw more than a decade of division, inconsistency and complacency towards China. There was no strategy, there was no plan, and there was no sense of a national interest. The Intelligence and Security Committee, chaired by the Right Honourable Member for New Forest East, from her own party, said that the actions on China had left Britain severely handicapped in managing our future security. And the truth was that she was at the centre of it. Where was she during the ill-judged Cameron Osborne golden age? She was the Minister for the Treasury. Where was she during the humiliating Huawei U-turn? She was Home Secretary at that point. Under the Tories, they had their head in the sand. Under them, Britain's defences were weakened and our armed services hollowed out. It's a Labour government that's investing £600 million in our intelligence services to deal with those threats. It's a Labour government that's investing £290 million extra a year in our diplomatic capabilities in this area. It's a Labour government delivering the biggest increase in defence spending since the Cold War, and it's a Labour government making Britain secure at home and strong abroad. And can I just refer the Honourable Lady to page 28 of the Strategic Defence Review, which she clearly hadn't bothered to read, that makes clear that of course we understand that China is a sophisticated and persistent threat. She talks about the embassy. She should know as Home Secretary that it is a quasi-judicial decision that's been properly made by the Secretary at the Department for communities and local government. She talks about Jimmy Lai. I met with Sebastian Lai last week. We've been raising this issue on every single occasion. A trial is ongoing. Let us see how it will complete. She raises transnational aggression. We're the ones updating our state threats legislation because they left the gaps and did nothing while they were in power. She raises the situation in Russia and the Chinese supplying Russia with Jews. Who has done the sanctions? 5 rounds of sanctions under me as Foreign Secretary. What did they do? So really, I'm not going to take any lectures about this subject from this government who know they were found wanting on the question of threats from the Chinese.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Emily Thornberry.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our relationship with China is most definitely a difficult one. On the one hand, it's our third biggest trading partner, but on the other hand, the National Security Strategy on page 35 says that there's an increase in espionage, they're undermining our economic security, and they're interfering in our democracy, and that has increased over recent years. And the Foreign Office needs to hold the ring. So the China audit it needs to be a wide-ranging and is a really important piece of work. We were looking forward to seeing it published and looking forward to the Foreign Secretary publishing it and coming to talk to us, and he did say that he would. But instead of that, we are looking through a glass darkly, and we don't know, we won't be able to see it. So we want to be able to do our job properly, we want to be able to scrutinise this really important piece of work, so can I suggest that instead that the Foreign Secretary makes available a reading room for Foreign Affairs Committee members and staff at the FCDO before his 8th of July appearance so that we can study it properly and hold him to account.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for the issue that she's taken in the China audit, and I did say that I would update the committee, and I'm looking forward to appearing before the committee and taking questions on this subject. Can I say to her that in completing this audit, it has been important to remain consistent with our Five Eyes partners, and she will recognise why much of the audit has led to a high level of classification. And she will note when she looks across the G7 and other Five Eyes partners, she will recognise that actually many of them have handled their approach to China in the way that I have set out in doing what I have said. But I would refer her to the Strategic Defence Review and its contents on China. I would refer her to the National Security Strategy that has just been published and its references to China. And I would also refer her to the UK's industrial strategy and its references to China alongside the statement that I've just made.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Callum Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also thank the Foreign Secretary for the advance sight of his statement. For years, UK governments have failed to take seriously the challenge posed by China. The Conservatives failed to deliver even the semblance of a coherent approach to dealing with Beijing. And today, after months of waiting for this audit, the government's failure to publish a standalone document is immensely disappointing. So can the Foreign Secretary set out how members of this House, including those on the Intelligence and Security Committee and the front benches with responsibility for foreign affairs, defence and security, can be briefed on the more sensitive elements of this audit? On these benches, Madam Deputy Speaker, we recognise China for what it is, a threat to our values and interests. The Foreign Secretary is right that our approach must confront the facts as they are. These facts include China's hostility to the UK's allies and support for our adversaries, its abuse of human rights in Xinjiang and Hong Kong, the theft of intellectual property, and its efforts at transnational repression. And so instead of trying to establish warm relations with President Xi, the government should commit to clear red lines on what it will not accept. For example, we have yet to receive a satisfactory explanation for why the Honourable Member for Bath was denied entry to Hong Kong while on a private visit to see her family. So will the Foreign Secretary confirm what steps he will take if Beijing refuses to give an assurance that MPs will not be blocked from visiting Hong Kong or China? We now hear reports that the Deputy Prime Minister is preparing to wave through Beijing's application for a proposed mega embassy in the heart of London. This is not a technical planning matter to be cloaked in the veil of quasi-judicial powers. It is a matter of national security. Opposition has been expressed by the United States and by pro-democracy Chinese and Hong Kong activists living in the UK who already face CCP-sponsored bounties. Has the Foreign Secretary met with these activists? And will the Foreign Secretary now formally request that the mega embassy application be blocked?
Well, I'm grateful for the Honourable Gentleman's statement. And as I have said, this was a comprehensive audit of our relations with China, and precisely because of some of the reasons that he and honourable members have raised consistently. There are important classified sections of that audit that quite must properly remain classified, but he does raise the Intelligence Committee, and he will recognise that the mechanisms are in place for that committee to understand some of the detail as he would expect and scrutinise as he would expect in the usual way. He mentions the experience of the Honourable Lady for Bath, and can I make clear that when I met with the Chinese international minister and the member of the Communist Party just recently, Mr. Li Jingchao, I did raise with him that case and our huge concerns and its implications for the free travel of British citizens and democratically elected members of Parliament, not just in this country, but across the world. He raises the embassy and questions of security. That was precisely why I and the Home Secretary, advised by our security agencies, wrote on the issue of the embassy, raising concerns that would need to be addressed if it was to move forward. And yes, of course, I've met with activists campaigning, particularly on the issue of transnational repression, and so has the Minister who deals with this issue and the Indo-Pacific.
Matt Dougall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As chair of both the APPG on Uyghurs and on Hong Kongers, I've lost count of the number of responses from ministers I've had which referred to today's audit. So you'll forgive me if I take today as the start of a conversation rather than the last word on many of these matters. He used again today his 3 C's mantra of competing with China, cooperating with them and challenge them where needed. I wonder if he understands that many of the Hong Kongers, the Uyghurs and others who are fighting for freedom from or within the PRC sometimes worry that the order of that is deliberate and that the challenge part is a lower priority. I wonder what reassurance he can give to those groups that commercial interests won't trump the responsibility to protect the freedoms and security, particularly of British Hong Kongers. And given the threats identified in the audit, but also in the national security challenge, can he confirm that those will be fed into the decision-making on whether to allow the embassy?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend and for his championing on the APG and pressing these issues. And can I say, I said in my statement that we will cooperate where we can, but we will challenge where we must. And of course, I have consistently raised the situation in meetings with counterparts for the Uyghur Muslims. I've encouraged them to implement the recommendations of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in relation to Xinjiang. Genocide, of course, is a matter for the international courts, but it is something that I and, of course, across our allies in the G7 take very, very seriously indeed. And we will press this issue with the government of China on every single occasion.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I first of all, before we go to the political knockabout, it doesn't matter who's in government, I've been in opposition on this issue, okay, so let's settle that one before we get... Can I just say to him, I give him a quick audit now of exactly what should have been. China threatens Taiwan, it's invaded the South China Seas, it's having massive disputes with the Philippines, it's genocide, slave labour, organ harvesting, transnational repression, attacks Hong Kong's dissidents here, Hong Kong dissidents under threat constantly, cyber attacks on the UK, supports Myanmar in their repression, the military regime, supports Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it also supports North Korea and Iran, and has trashed the Sino-British Treaty on Hong Kong, it has arrested Jimmy Lai, it has sanctions on UK MPs, and it thieves all the IPs on private companies. What a record to balance what against some potential trade. I asked the right honourable gentleman, which has already in a way been asked, but it's worth repeating, in the course of this embassy decision, that it was said quite clearly in the media that China would not apply again after the refusal of Tower Hamlets unless they received assurances from the UK government. Can he now tell me that they have not received any assurances, or have they received private assurances from the government that they will get what they want and get this embassy?
Well, let me just express respect for the right honourable gentleman's expertise in relation to the China threat, and also that he is subject to sanctions that I have consistently raised with China, noting that recently it lifted sanctions against members of the European Parliament, and I pressed them recently to do the same. And let me assure him, there are no grubby deals on any issues, and certainly not in relation to the embassy. And I reject any suggestion of anything other. He describes the context for China. I refer him to page 28, which summarises, better than he did, in fact, the challenge. It's a sophisticated and persistent challenge. China is increasingly leveraging its economic, technological, military capabilities, seeking to establish dominance in the Indo-Pacific, erode US influence and put pressure on the rules-based international order. We agree.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for his statement. I'll be the first to recognise with him the need for pragmatism on this issue. My right honourable friend speaks of our closest allies, and I heard in Washington a couple of weeks ago just about their concerns over the super embassy, of course, here in London, where they have real concerns, as I say, but also the fact that they are banning electric vehicles for their autonomous and connected nature, which is an extraordinary thing to consider, but that is what they are doing. So whilst I recognise there is an economic need, obviously there is political pressure as well. Can I just ask that for the members of the committee that I chair in the National Security Strategy, that we should also have access to those confidential documents so we can be clear-eyed about what we face?
Well, again, I'm grateful for the work that my honourable friend does in this area, but I must maintain that it has not been the case under any government that for other than those on the Intelligence Committee who are able to have access to high classification documents, and those who are Privy Councillors who are able to have access to conversations with the government and officials that they pledge to keep secret. The government cannot abandon those principles that have led us well for many years under consistent governments.
Edward Morello.
Madam Deputy Speaker, on page 35 of the National Security Strategy it says instances of China's espionage, interference in our democracy and undermining of our economic security have increased in recent years. Just 3 pages later, it claims the importance of creating the basis for a reciprocal and balanced economic relationship with China. I wonder if the Foreign Secretary recognises the inherent conflict between this government's desire for closer economic relations and the Chinese government's desire to undermine our economy.
Well, the paradox is important, but let me be clear that £600 million worth of new investment in our intelligence services is an important development. Investment in our capabilities, including new powers and capabilities for the National Cyber Centre, is an important development. But of course, as our third biggest trading partner, being able to unlock £1 billion worth of trade must also be central to our undertaking at this time.
Gurinder Singh Yosam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this statement, particularly as it becomes clearer and clearer in terms of how the Conservatives have so badly mismanaged not just the policy towards China, but also our relationship with China over successive years. Whilst there are economic opportunities with China, there are also threats, and we're hearing about some of those. But we also just heard in the National Security Strategy statement earlier about the importance of partnerships and alliances, including with key allies in the Indo-Pacific. Does the Foreign Secretary agree that Boris Johnson's 2019 embracing of China's Belt and Road Initiative was a serious diversion from many of our democratic allies, many of whom saw the Belt and Road Initiative as a threat?
Well, I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman. Prime Minister Johnson's record on China is shocking. It led to the grave embarrassment of having to do a U-turn on Huawei, who at that stage would have been able to get into the most delicate of our own telecommunications infrastructure. It's because of that we undertook to do a full audit in opposition. That audit, of course, is constantly ongoing, but I hope he will see it reflected in the industrial strategy, in the national security strategy, and of course in the SDR that was published recently.
Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I say I enjoyed the buzzword bingo with which the Right Honourable Member presented his statement. And may I just remind him that the rebellion on Huawei was actually led by this side of the House, not by his. May I also just question one of the meetings he referred to with, may I say, a little more pride than I would have done, as he referred to meeting Liu Jinchao, who is personally responsible for Operation Fox Hunt and Skynet, which is, of course, the transnational repression, the kidnapping of Chinese citizens and the repatriating them by force to mainland China. He didn't seem to be quite as ashamed of that as I would have been. Yeah. May I also ask him why he has still not made clear that the first scheme that we left intact, left ready to go, will not yet be introduced for the whole of the Chinese state. It should be, that's what it was designed for, and for all the words that we've heard, there is not a single practical outcome. It's all still waffle.
I've got to say to the honourable gentleman, and I recognise that there, and it's right to put that on record, there are members in their seat on the opposition benches, and he is amongst them, who raised significant issues over the past decade or so about the approach to China. But with all seriousness, that was why, in opposition, we said that we would do a full audit. He will recognise that and welcome, I suspect, the extra investment in the intelligence services, particularly in our national cyber capability. And I see, as I say that he's nodding his head. Those are tangible outcomes. You cannot, on any analysis, describe that as waffle.
Rosie Writing.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Before coming into Parliament, I worked in a buying department for a large international retailer, and in my career I saw a move to sourcing from China and a rise in popularity in retailers based in China. So can the Secretary of State outline how the audit will work with the Department of Business and Trade to level the playing field between UK manufacturers and imports from China, particularly in light of unfair trading practices, to protect our economic security in UK supply chains?
Well, can I refer her, it's a very good question, I say to my honourable friend, to the industrial strategy, to the further work that we say we've got to now do on supply chains. One of the areas that we've taken a big interest in from day one in government, of course, is global supply chains in critical minerals. And we're working with now many partners across the world with the Global Clean Power Alliance to provide those new supply chains to deal with the very issues that she has raised.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I first of all say thank you to the Foreign Secretary for his efforts that he's made in raising the issue of being refused entry into Hong Kong. And I'm looking forward to reassurances that no UK MP will be refused entry into any Chinese territories. Madam Deputy Speaker, his statement mentions that China is our university's second largest source of international students, and that includes my University of Bath. And while, of course, global academic exchange and the free flow of ideas is at the heart of our liberal values and should be welcomed, shouldn't the government be aware of the fine balance that must be kept, not allowing young researchers and students access to certain knowledge and information that could ultimately be used against the UK?
She's absolutely right. It is a fine balance. We do need to invest more in our police capability, and that is an outcome of this audit. And we do need to continue to work with our universities so they understand the threats in this area as well as the opportunities.
Before I call the next speaker, members will be aware that we have 3 debates this afternoon, so I am aiming to finish this statement around 2:35. Louise Jones.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just say to the Foreign Secretary how much I welcome this China audit, and in particular there's one aspect that I'd like to highlight. As someone who studied Chinese at university and lived there for a year, I know how complex and different China can be, and it has also been a source of frustration to me since then about how there can be many misconceptions and ignorance around China. And I think whatever anybody thinks of our relationship with China, what is absolutely vital is that we have very clear communication and that we deal with China from a position of knowledge. So can I just say, will the Foreign Secretary agree with me how important it is that we have the upskilling of the FCDO to make sure that we have that knowledge of Chinese culture and language skills so that we are fully prepared for the years ahead?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for her question. It goes to the heart of capabilities. We've got to have diplomats, more diplomats, with a fine understanding of China, more Mandarin speakers, and we're doing that. The last government, sadly, were cutting the amount of diplomats with that capability and that understanding, and investing in the Great British China Centre, so that that understanding of the culture is across our country. She's absolutely right.
And can I just remind members that it may be very helpful if we have short questions and short answers. David Reid.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the one hand, the Defence Secretary has told the world that the UK will increase offensive cyber operations against China. And on the other hand, the Deputy Prime Minister is pushing for a Chinese super embassy in London, which will be furnished with secret data cabling. Does the Foreign Secretary see any inconsistencies with his government's approach to China?
What I see is naivety on the behalf of the honourable gentleman. Let's be clear, the Deputy Prime Minister has not made her quasi-judicial decision, and it's wrong, and the honourable member should correct the record of the House because it's not made. That's the first thing. The second thing is, why would you want a situation in which the United States can take the hardest of approach on China under both governments, but trade is up, in which our G7 partners can understand the risks and the threats of China, but all of their trade is up. Under the last government, we were in a situation where trade was down only for the UK. That cannot be right.
Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I refer members to my register of interest. So I thank the Secretary of State for his pragmatic approach. I think opposition is easy, but I think members opposite know that if they were in his shoes, they would be doing exactly the same thing. Huawei has been mentioned a couple of times in passing. The reality is that the guddle over that rollout, it delayed rollout of 5G by 3 years and cost the economy £7 million, which is just incredible. Shameful, actually, shameful. In terms of my questions, so there is, I welcome the stress that placed on improving cultural links between the UK and China, and of course our universities are a key part of that. So can he commit to making sure our universities have say in how we establish better relationships between China and the UK?
I can reassure him that our universities were able to contribute to our China audit.
Law.
Thank you,
Madam Deputy Speaker. And as the Chair for the All-Party Group of Tibet, I welcome the fact they've responded to human rights, both the situation in Xinjiang, Tibet. I would like to have seen about religious freedoms, which includes next week's birthday of the Dalai Lama, probably the most well-known Tibetan in the world, and its future reincarnation should be for the people of Tibet, both inside and the diaspora. Given the Tibetan diaspora and the Uyghur diaspora and Hong Kong nationals are under constant surveillance here by the Chinese Communist Party, how does the government plan to take the G7 definition of transnational repression recently agreed and translate it into domestic law?
Right. Foreign Secretary.
Well, can I remind the honourable gentleman that in December we appointed David Smith, MP, the Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion and Belief, and he's right to raise the issues that we're aware of in Tibet. And can I also say to him that on the issue of transnational repression, we've got a broad range of powers, obviously, to counter foreign interference in transnational repression, particularly under the National Security Act, which we're updating.
Speak to Swallow.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Foreign Secretary both for the statement and for that answer. He will know that in Bracknell and the wider Berkshire area we have a large Hong Kong community who have been terrified at the threat of national repression from the Hong Kong government. What message can he share to my constituents about the protections available in this country for them to enjoy the democracy and freedom of speech that we so value here in the UK?
Secretary.
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and the Minister for the Indo-Pacific has met with some of his constituents on this issue, and I hope he will welcome, because of the right concerns that he raises, the training for our police right across the nation on these issues.
Gregory Stafford.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the government publish a list of sectors considered overly dependent on Chinese inputs, starting with critical minerals and clean energy components, to promote transparency? And will the Minister outline any clear government targets for reducing these dependencies?
Well, can I refer him to the powers in the Counter Foreign Interference Transnational Repression under the National Security Act?
Tom Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Foreign Secretary mentioned Hong Kong in a statement, and I just wondered if he would consider speaking to colleagues in the Home Office about rethinking the changes to indefinite leave to remain, to making sure B&O passport holders don't end up facing questions going forward about their status to remain.
Foreign Secretary.
The issue he raises is still subject to consultation and will be announced by the Home Secretary in the usual way.
Harriet Cross.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK government is still considering Mingyang as a credible supplier for turbines for the Greenvolt offshore wind project, and the SNP Scottish Government have given Mingyang priority status for a factory to build turbines based in Scotland under their strategic investment plan. Both of these say to me that neither government is taking seriously the threat that China poses to our energy supplies. China is at best unreliable and at worst hostile and should be nowhere near our critical national infrastructure. So will the Secretary of State finally rule out, or at least give us a date of when we can hear a decision on if Mingyang will be a permitted supplier for energy infrastructure in the future?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, can I say to the Honourable Lady that through the National Security and Investment Act, we've got a robust framework to make individual decisions like the one she refers to on Mingyang. And as she knows, energy is one of 17 priority sectors under the NSIA in which government can block any potential acquisitions on security grounds, and that remains under consideration.
Luke Taylor.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's 4 years today since the Apple Daily ceased publication, and Jimmy Lai still languishes in a Hong Kong Stanley prison. It's worth noting his name and encouraging the Home Secretary the Foreign Secretary to raise his case as often as he can. It's welcome to see in the statement that we are strengthening our response to transnational repression. Can the Minister confirm that that includes restoring access to the Mandatory Provident Fund, which is another way that the Hong Kong Government is spreading its chilling impact on B&O visa holders here in the UK?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for raising this. So can I also just name-check the work of the Member for Cities and Westminster on this issue? The issue is under consideration And we have been, of course, discussing with communities these very important pension issues.
Sir Julian Lewis.
So in his statement, the Foreign Secretary says that our approach will always be guided by the UK's long-term economic growth priorities. And as an example of this, he refers to our university's second largest source of international students being China. And yet the Intelligence and Security Committee's report on China, of which he approves, did state in its press notice, China is similarly aggressive in its interference activities. China oversteps the boundary. It's been particularly effective at using its money and influence to penetrate or buy academia in order to ensure its international narrative is advanced and criticism suppressed. Now, in answer to the Honourable Lady for Bath, he did say, well, we look to the universities to take precautions. Where the financial incentive to universities is concerned, I'd rather look to someone else to take the precautions.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman is right. We do have to be vigilant. As I said, sitting behind this audit is a lot of work at high classification, and he will know that the Intelligence Committee understands the very nature of that work and understands the nature of the work, particularly that sits behind the Strategic Defence Review and the National Security Strategy. And of course, that is ongoing. And I'm happy to ensure that he is aware of the work that we are doing with the universities at this time.
Christine Jardine.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Foreign Secretary has already referred to the energy protections with energy companies, but with the situation with Binyang and Cable Orient in the Highlands and in the North Sea, the concern is not their ability to produce, it's their ability to switch off and on the network and our energy security and, as a result, national security. So can he tell us what mitigating factors are going to be put in place if those contracts are won?
Foreign Secretary.
I recognise the sensitivity and the import of what the Honourable Lady has said, and that is central to the considerations and the discussions that are underway within government as we look at these issues and balance them against our national security.
Jim Allister.
For which, Madam Deputy Speaker, some questions on China have been deflected on the basis wait for the audit. So it's rather disappointing that the insight we get today is indeed very opaque. In the Foreign Secretary's statement, he reveals that China is the UK's second largest research collaborator. Has the Foreign Secretary done an audit of the nature of that research? Are there economic and intelligent risks from that research? And is the government minded to take any steps to either monitor or to control the extent of that research?
Okay.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman says that he would have liked to have heard more and that it's opaque, but the other side of that coin is that it might be reassuring that the government is not making available to the outside world and to China all of our intelligent capability and understanding. He will recognise that the biggest academic partner in that research is the United States. It is not surprising, as we see the economy of China grow in the way that it has, certainly over my 2 decades in Parliament, that it has emerged as our second largest. But I'd want to reassure him that, of course, the agencies are able to offer full advice to universities and examine sensitivities. And we are very, very aware of the threats that he has conveyed to the House this afternoon.
And with an example of a quick question, Sir Desmond Swain.
It was proper and lawful to send HMS Spey through the Taiwan Strait in pursuit of vital international freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, wasn't it? And can we see more like it?
Yes, yes.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to remind the Foreign Secretary that the government that invited Huawei into our telecommunications network was actually the last Labour government between 2003 and 2006.
Long memories.
He's tried to be partisan about it. The ebb and flow of these issues and the mistakes go back quite a long time, and he should acknowledge that. What assessment has he made of China's dominance of the world market for cellular internet modules, which are subsidised and sold internationally below the cost of manufacture? What assessment in particular has he made of the insertion of kill switches in Chinese-made wind turbines and PV cells? And will he rule out any Chinese involvement in our energy infrastructure?
I'm really going to take no lectures from the Honourable Gentleman, whose advice to former Prime Minister May led to the possibility of nuclear information being revealed. He should be embarrassed, and I'm surprised he came to this debate this afternoon.
Neil Shackelford.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given that China is one of the defining geopolitical challenges of our age, I'm somewhat sceptical to read reports this morning that this much-touted, year-long awaited audit was in fact being significantly downgraded. Under this government, there has been a significant increase in ministerial engagement and visits with China, a policy that is at best incoherent and at worst incompetent. Given that actions speak louder than words, can the Foreign Secretary confirm that the Prime Minister will no longer be making his proposed trip to China?
Foreign Secretary.
I've got to say to the Honourable Gentleman, this is a lot of work, and we haven't even been in government a year. We pledged to undertake an audit. We've undertaken that audit. What I set out was comprehensive, and there can be no no-go areas for the UK Prime Minister.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The audit received responses from devolved governments. Last month, the Northern Ireland Finance Minister met with the Chinese Consul General in Belfast. The meeting was described as a formal diplomatic engagement of exchanging views on deepening cooperation. Significantly, Madam Deputy Speaker, no publicly released minutes or press interviews or who the full attendees were. No specific sectors or agreements referenced. Does the Foreign Secretary know what was discussed or agreed? Because as foreign policy isn't devolved, does he think he should, and will he ask? Or did the devolved government in Northern Ireland's executive, as a response to the audit, actually include what was discussed or previous meetings between the Chinese government and the First and Deputy First Minister?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman has put his views on the record, and I will consult my officials about what he has revealed.
The final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Foreign Secretary very much. I believe it is essential that we have a fuller understanding of the reach of China as well as their goals. And British citizens have contacted me regarding the human rights violation, not only against those in China, but those who live on our shores. So how will the Foreign Secretary undertake to ensure that China understands that their reach stops at our shores and that our people are entitled to think and to have freedom of speech, whatever they desire, and without any fear of reprisal? Thanks so much.
Secretary.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman is right. Our democratic norms we will always fight for and we will always press. We cannot accept repression, oppression and actually criminal acts committed in our own country. We will stand up to them, and I have made those representative to my Chinese interlocutors to make that completely clear.
And that concludes the statement. Point of order, Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to seek your advice about the exchange I just had with the Foreign Secretary. Firstly, I pointed out that after the Foreign Secretary had been incredibly partisan about the history of Huawei's involvement in our telecommunications infrastructure, that involvement actually began under the last Labour government when he was a minister in that government and he tried to accuse members of the Conservative front bench of something similar. I also asked a serious question about the Chinese dominance of the world market for cellular internet modules, which is a very serious issue. We've all grown used to the fact that we don't get answers in this House, so perhaps you could give us advice about whether ministers are ever actually going to answer a question. But then he decided to abuse me and insult me personally about advice he claims I gave to the Prime Minister in a former role I had. He has no idea what advice I gave in that job. And if he cares so much about my personal history, he would actually read all the things I've ever written about the role of Chinese companies in our energy infrastructure. So I'd like him to take the opportunity to withdraw that accusation.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his point of order. What he refers to was a matter of debate and nothing disorderly occurred. This is not a matter of the chair, but I would urge that good temper and moderation in this chamber be followed at all times.
Point of order.
Point of order, Ian Duncan-Smith.
Well, I'll give way to the
Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it is a matter of record that former Prime Minister May was considering matters that pertain to our nuclear capability. The Honourable Member was an advisor at that stage, and she had to withdraw her recommendations on the China General Nuclear Company. That is a matter of record, and anyone in this chamber can Google it.
Point of order, Ian Duncan-Smith.
This is a separate point of order, Madam Deputy Speaker. While the Foreign Secretary is sitting here, I thought it would be relevant. We've just heard that America, the government, American government, has put in a second disapproval on the granting of an embassy to China in the location that it is. They've actually said they are opposed to it now for security reasons.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his point of order. However, as he knows, it is not a matter for the chair, but he has put his comments on the record. We now move to the 10-minute rule motion, and I'll give a few moments for the House to settle so that the member in charge has adequate opportunity to be heard. Thank you, David. Ten-minute rule motion. Blake Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about the consideration of flooding risk in the planning process, to make internal drainage boards statutory consultees for certain planning decisions and for connected purposes. During this Parliament, we've heard a lot about the problems in the planning system. In particular, the government has spoken a lot about what it sees as the blockers, people who, for reasons this government seem not to understand, oppose developments they see as bad for their communities. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill intends to help go some way to fix the government's problem. Because the reality is, the reason many people in our communities become blockers is that they have no faith that the planning system will deliver houses that make their lives better. These are hard-working people, Madam Deputy Speaker, and rather than listen to their concerns, the government has sought to bash them at every turn. One of the biggest problems in the planning system is the total failure of so many local authorities, and I refer members to my register of interest as a councillor, to properly understand and consider flood risk in new developments. That means that policy the government thinks ought to be sufficient to prevent, for example, development on floodplains in all but exceptional circumstances is being circumvented by developers. And without suitable expertise in planning, these developments are often going ahead without suitable drainage infrastructure to protect our communities from flooding. What does all of this mean, Madam Deputy Speaker? It means that for so many communities in mid-Bedfordshire and right across the country who've done the right thing, who've taken houses that the government wants them to take, those communities now find themselves with a higher flood risk, while developers have gotten away high and dry with their profits. And when they stand ankle deep in water in their once dry living rooms and desperately attempt to stop the next bad development making their situation worse, the Prime